And away we go on a Monday. Happiness is a choice. Thank you for choosing us, along with James Westling. I am Ari Temkin. We got a busy Monday show for you today, including Joey McGuire, the head football coach of Texas Tech, fresh off their spring game on Friday. We'll be visiting with Joey coming up in about 30 minutes from now. And, of course, cheers to all you Modelo full-time fans listening to today's show and everyday's show. Rule number 15, the football offseason is not an off-season. It's recruiting season, portal season, and spring game season layered on top of each other. And, of course, that's what we're going to be recapping today. We're talking through many a spring game that occurred this weekend across the Big 12. James Westling, hey, good to see you.
You too.
Hope you had a better weekend than the parachuter in Blacksburg, Virginia at the Virginia Tech spring game, who apparently misjudged where he was landing and just caromed directly into the scoreboard.
Relatable on so many levels.
You're a big parachuter?
Huge parachuter.
I could tell.
But I often just run into things, walls, vehicle doors, whatever.
Whether or not you're parachuting.
The ultimate fail. Like every time I'm trying to bring in a bag of groceries or a load of groceries, something's always falling over, just chaos at all times. And I'm surprised, and maybe this isn't the first time something like this has occurred. It's just the first time in this digital era where everybody's got their phones out. But I see stuff like this all the time. Like Willie the Wildcat used to parachute in and then take out the opposing mascot. And I'd always think, what if something goes wrong? Like, this feels pretty gutsy. I wonder how much they actually practice this maneuver. And apparently this guy just totally missed the spot.
Yeah, and maybe it was windy. Not sure. There was two other parachuters. He was the one with the American flag, and so he was draped there against the scoreboard for about 15 minutes. It delayed the start of the Virginia Tech spring game. Eventually he was able to be rescued, didn't have to go to the hospital or anything, was perfectly fine. So I guess it's okay to laugh at him since he's fine.
Yeah, he was fine, just kind of dangled there for, like you said, 10 to 15 minutes. The embarrassment is probably the most impactful thing, just to be hanging on there, knowing that the game is delayed because you made an error somewhere, clearly, and kind of the bearer, like the lead of the pack with the flag being the guy that hit the scoreboard, hit the Jumbotron, not good.
Yeah, no, not good at all. Did you have a good weekend?
I did. Yeah, I listened to about 12 hours of podcasts. So,
okay.
We can do a little AMA later. Ask me anything. Because I had some bangers. The future is here. It's pretty exciting. It's probably my number one takeaway. But, yeah, it was nice.
Good. What's the AMA in reference to? Just knowledge, general world knowledge? Is that what we're...
Yeah, 12 hours I hit a variety of topics.
Okay.
But probably the one that was most intriguing to me were the flying cars that are here. The technology's here. The training is here. They're just awaiting clearance from the FAA. And so, there's a huge issue with 50% of the world population lives in what's considered cities now. The other half in rural communities. That number in the next 5 to 10 years is going to be 70% of the world. So how in the world are we going to get around?
Flying cars, of course.
Flying cars. 4-passenger flying cars. Like you think in Uber or Waymo's the future, I should say. No, it's these flying cars. They've got it all figured out.
Yeah, and honestly, of all of the things in this future that you could not have foreseen, the flying car is the one thing where it's like, where's my flying cars?
Exactly.
That and hoverboards, which just continue to upset me. We do not have hoverboards. There was some brand that decided to call these things that do not hover hoverboards, and now people are talking about hoverboards. I remember a couple years ago somebody's like, oh yeah, a hoverboard, and I was like, what? Wait, we have them? They're like, yeah, you haven't seen these things? And then they showed me what they were talking about. I was like, yeah, I've seen those. That's not a hoverboard. A hoverboard is a very specific definition, does it not?
Was it hovering above the ground?
Correct. No, it wasn't.
Then it's not a hoverboard.
And it's not a hoverboard.
1,000%.
It's just insane how somebody can corner the market on hoverboards and not even be hovering.
But being able to travel in the air for short distances that would normally, without any traffic, be like 20 to 30 minutes. With traffic in these major cities, like right here in Dallas, it can take an hour, hour and a half to get places that with no traffic takes 20 minutes. With these flying crafts, bam. There in just a couple of minutes.
Just like supersonic travel.
Supersonic travel.
Which, if you've not heard, apparently Adam Silver is out there talking about the potential for the NBA to expand into Europe, which I think is kind of interesting for college basketball, too, to consider. But here is what Adam Silver said on a recent podcast that he was on. He was on with Boomer and Carton, or rather just one of them, Carton Show, WFAN in New York.
opportunity. And right now, basketball is the number 2 sport in Europe, but from a commercial standpoint, generates about 1% of the revenue.
Second to soccer, I assume?
Second to soccer, yeah. But from a commercial standpoint is minuscule. And so the marketplace sees a big opportunity in basketball. I mean, we've already talked about, of course, Luka, whether it's, Shai Gilgeous-Alexander's Canadian, I mean, he's not European, but, the number of international players we have now, Giannis, Wemby, some of our very best players,
sure.
Jokic, I could keep going on. But so about 15% of our league now is made up of European players. If anybody was watching the NCAA championship, there've been a huge increase in the last few years, largely because of NIL payments. They can make more now playing in college than they could in Europe. Right. It's pretty straightforward. So there's no doubt that there's amazing amount of top-notch basketball being played in Europe and great development of players. So we're in this process right now, so this would be a standalone league. But I would just say over time that I've been following, there used to be the Concorde, obviously, Supersonic Jets. There's a company called Boom Sonic that's saying by 2030 they're going to have supersonic jets again.
Because travel's a big concern.
But I'm just saying to your point about, whether initially you could see some of those teams competing in some tournaments we had throughout the season. But long term, I could definitely imagine we could have a division in Europe. Obviously it's a very global game. And also for our sport, that from a commercial standpoint, the arena is so much part of the operation. And what's interesting, for those who, watched the last Summer Olympics, talk about Steph Curry and his heroics, in Paris, it's a bit surprising. Like in Paris, the arena is really old. It's fine, for playing a basketball game. But from a commercial standpoint, they don't have all the back-of-house space that we have in our arenas, all the great restaurants and lounges and all the other commercial opportunities. So the interesting thing about our sport, it's both for these great European cities. It's not just bringing in, a potential an NBA-type team, but also same thing you've seen market by market in the United States. Sort of started with this LA Live complex where, it's an arena. You see it in San Francisco now, together with retail, commercial space, residential. So it looks like a really big opportunity we're spending time on. As I said, whether we have a division is something way down the road, but I think short term you could see, a really successful standalone league in Europe.
Interesting stuff there. I mean, European basketball has obviously grown. We talked about the influence in European basketball when it came to college basketball this season because it was so ingrained in the sport this year. And it feels in some ways like the NBA is sort of late in this discussion. Because the NFL has done a fantastic job of cultivating a fan base, of having games, of making them huge events in Europe, where, there's been a natural popularity for the sport in Europe for a long time, really since the Dream Team, which has influenced so many of these players. It's almost like we kind of missed the opportunity there if you're the NBA. Not to say it isn't a potential future opportunity. I understand the distinction, but it feels like a missed opportunity for a league that probably should have been in Europe for a long time.
Definitely, because their best European players are playing in America. There's a lot to unpack from that clip. I think my number one pet peeve is when hosts interrupt the guest. We're 10 seconds into that clip. It's soccer. I'm assuming soccer's number one. Just let him finish, dude. And then 3 or 4 other times we hear the host. We don't need to hear the host. Have a follow-up question ready.
Right. Well, it's sometimes the host can interrupt and it's productive, but not in this case.
No, he's just shouting things.
He's just, I'm here. I'm not in jail anymore.
Once I heard that, that's all I could think about.
Yeah.
But yeah, 15% of the NBA is now European. We know it's the number 1 or number 2 sport on that continent after soccer, which is pretty easy to assume. I don't understand why that needed to happen. I'm fascinated by the supersonic travel by 2030. And then also I do think this relates to some of the schools in the Big 12, a lot of the schools in the Big 12, with the international flavor. And maybe this would be a step towards making basketball a true worldwide sport, because there's several Big 12 schools I was reading over the weekend that have these schools that are quiet right now when it comes to the transfer portal. Several of them have international players that have committed to their school, but they cannot sign them or announce that signing until after their Euro League season is complete. Some schools have already gone forward doing that in other conferences. So maybe the Big 12 is tapping more into that international market. I think about Arizona, who led the country in international players. I know Oklahoma State is tapping into that. Kansas State is another that's tapping into that under Casey Alexander. So I think there's going to be a lot of international flavor in the Big 12 next season, like we saw this past year.
Well, it's really interesting, too, from the transfer portal standpoint, because, when players make decisions to enter the portal, I think they're factoring in maybe the volume of players in the portal overall, but they probably don't factor in the opportunities for European players that are now becoming even more and more widespread. So just shows just how much of a buyer's market it continues to be in that way, certainly for a lot of players. And, that's a really interesting wrinkle to it. For the NBA, it almost sounds like an opportunity to do something similar to, what international soccer is, with like a Champions League, which could be, hugely impactful if they can develop sort of another league in Europe and then eventually have them compete. I think the issue with that being obviously, you have so many international players that are top end players. Do you want to make it attractive for them to go play in that other league, which may be, become hugely popular in Europe, but now you're not getting sort of the, local domestic flair in terms of, that star recognition. So
Right.
I understand the balance side of it of, trying to try to grow in Europe while simultaneously, like, how is it productive to grow in Europe? But it's clear that, like, compared to football, basketball is probably late to the game. And certainly in college recruiting, it's a huge part of now building a roster.
Yeah, if the NBA creates its own European league, does that help or does that hurt college basketball? And I think there's two sides of it. The downside would be that it waters down the pool, right? A lot of these international prospects that are playing in college, there's one more league for them to play in. Maybe they play in the NBA Europe. And then to your point, what's the balance of guys that are currently in the Euro League? Would they rather be in that, or would they rather be in a playing for a team in London or Paris or Madrid or Berlin that's part of this NBA Europe? The thing that fascinates me about that part of the country is just the amount of scouting and talent identification that these college basketball coaches have to have that separate the really good players that come from Europe, like the Ivan Karchinkovs at Arizona, the Mo Krivises, and then the guys that are buried on the bench at other schools in the Big 12 because they're too raw and they're not quite ready. Like, these guys go overseas, or these guys that are born overseas, they'll average 4 or 5 points a game. But they're playing against older men. They're 18 years old. They come over in and they ball out and average 13 in the NCAA tournament like Karchinkov did at Arizona. Then you have guys like Rapik at K-State, who was the same like 4 or 5, 6 point per game guy in Europe, comes over to K-State and was probably one of the better players on the team, but wasn't anywhere near ready like Karchinkov was in terms of the body and everything that goes into the polished part of the game. So it's a really interesting balancing act. Now, I would say the good from that, which ultimately I do think this would mean less international players in the Big 12 in college basketball. But the good is that opens up maybe more doors in terms of scholarships and opportunities for those 3-star developmental players that maybe aren't in the portal after year 1 or year 2. And you see more of the Iowa State model or some of the Houston model, guys that aren't necessarily the top 150 players, but they stick it out and they're developed from within because there's just more spots.
That's a great point, and probably one I didn't really think through in terms of, is the NBA and Adam Silver reacting to what we just saw in the Final Four and noticing all of these international prospects that, that college basketball is making them into big names and wondering, like, can't we do that?
Yep.
Shouldn't we be doing that?
Exactly.
And then what is the potential consequence of that for basketball, for college basketball? I mean, to your point, like, well, it opens up more doors and opportunities for guys to develop and kind of go back to the way that things were to a degree. That's a really interesting point.
And then also, what are these guys getting paid in NBA Europe? Is it kind of a middle ground between what college players are getting paid and what high-level NBA players are getting paid, or are they making like G League salaries? Because if they're making G League salaries, it's a no-brainer. This has no impact on the college game. But if they're making a little bit more or about the same than they would in college, then, yeah, they'd play in NBA Europe. It's a stepping stone to the NBA. They're closer to home. They don't have to travel across the Atlantic and basically, start over in a certain way. So, yeah, there's a lot of things to think about. It's a really fascinating concept.
Yeah, it is. Speaking of pay cuts, there was a piece that came out this weekend from David Ubben of The Athletic, kind of going through how some of these college quarterbacks, once they get to the league, and specifically Riley Leonard and Will Howard, they're actually getting massive pay cuts. And there was some pretty damning quotes from Will Howard in this piece about Kansas State. James, your face tells the whole story here.
Well, yeah, this has got K-State fans real fired up because he's saying that K-State took advantage of him. They got him for so cheap that he decided to go elsewhere and make a little money. And
quote, everything I did was on my own, talking about NIL at K-State. They kind of took advantage of me and got me for cheap, so I decided to go somewhere else and make a little money. It's different when you go to a school and you're the guy getting money. It's amazing how different you're treated. It was the best decision I've ever made. He also went on to say, basically, that because he felt like Avery Johnson was the guy that they wanted and paid for, that he got snaps and played basically due to the fact that he was being paid, even though Will Howard was the better player.
Well, and that's the part that has K-State fans really fired up because he's coming off like he was this all Big 12, All-American quarterback when he was at Kansas State. And yes, they did pay a bunch of money to Avery Johnson. He was a highly touted top 5 quarterback out of high school, and they wanted to keep him in the state of Kansas. But Will Howard got benched because K-State was really struggling in a game against Texas Tech, like week 7, week 8. Avery Johnson came in and rushed for 5 touchdowns, a school record. You could make the case that Avery's best year was when Will Howard was still on this team, and there was a healthy competition. Will Howard got hurt that season. He was banged up. Will Howard was not the Ohio State version of Will Howard when he was at Kansas State, which is why it was kind of a mutual parting of the ways.
Well, and he was to a degree. They just maybe didn't have the because, again, I saw a lot of the similar tendencies of Will Howard.
They didn't have Jeremiah Smith on the outside.
Right, yeah. I mean, or a defense to bail him out in the way that they did when he had a turnover against Texas in that playoff game a couple of years ago. I was a naive kid. I didn't know the nature of myself. I didn't want anything or need money. I said I was good. There were a lot of politics last year. There were games I was splitting time with him for no reason that I knew other than there was money going to him that wasn't going to me, end quote.
Trying to pull up his game log for his last year because
it's kind of brutal.
Let's see. He barely completed 50% of his passes in a home loss to Iowa State. He completed 54% of his passes and threw for less than 200 yards in a 4-point home win against Kansas when K-State was favored by 2 touchdowns.
The funny thing, too, is within this piece, like both Leonard and Will Howard talk about how they had to take pay cuts basically to go to the NFL.
Yeah.
And, at one point, Ubben says, well, they're not complaining. And it's like, yeah, you guys, both of you, are not really in position to get, second contracts in the league.
Right.
So it's just a bizarre piece, and it is kind of eye-opening in terms of just how entitled some of these guys become.
Very well said.
Especially Will Howard. I mean, my God. Kansas State gave you an opportunity. Full stop. Where else were you going to start and play?
He was a 2-star recruit out of high school. Kansas State found a diamond in the rough. He was so bad after his second year, K-State had him taking reps at tight end in the spring. And then they had an injury to Adrian Martinez, and it opened the door for Will Howard to get playing time and get on the field. And he had a really good year. He led K-State to a Big 12 championship. But then when he was the guy, when he was the man, K-State goes on the road at Texas. He has a career day. He throws for over 400 yards. K-State has 4th and goal from the 2-yard line. He throws an interception. He had a lot of plays that I'm sure he would like to have back, but this whole idea of K-State took advantage of me, it really rubs K-State fans the wrong way because K-State gave him more than ample opportunities. There were times when the fans were calling for him to get benched, and K-State's coach, Chris Kleiman, was backing him up, and he continued to be the guy. It is really weird to read this and to hear these comments because the thing at K-State was that he struggled with his confidence, and that was a thing over the entire course of his career. And then he goes to Ohio State. He's got all these pieces around him, and now he thinks he's the next Joe Montana. Like, I don't like it.
Yeah, and I mean, there's no more indicative 2026 quote than this, and these quotes in terms of like, man, K-State gave me an opportunity, but, years later, ... F them.
Well, and like he had kind of a falling out with the fans. He said all the right things, but it was pretty well known that like he was not happy with how the fans regarded him. And fair or unfair, he was not ready to handle that type of adversity and that spotlight. And I don't know what Ohio State fans, how they feel about him. Like,
Right.
Did Ohio State fans think he was, the greatest thing on earth? I find that hard to believe. I think Ohio State fans are very realistic and know they won with their defense and an above-average quarterback.
Yeah, if I were him, I'd get my nose in the playbook at Pittsburgh so that I've got, a little bit more than these next few seasons while I'm under contract. All right, that's James Westling. I am Ari Tepkin. This is Big 12 Today on Big 12 Radio. We are presented by Modelo. Joey McGuire joins us coming up in about 20 minutes from now. On the way next, though, let's get you caught up on all the Big 12 spring football headlines. A lot of spring games this weekend. We'll get you caught up on everything going on there. It's Big 12 Today with James. I'm Ari. The football offseason doesn't exist on Big 12 Radio because football never sleeps. This is Big 12 Today, Big 12 Radio, presented by Modelo. Heard on TuneIn, watched on Big 12 Studios.
He's scrambling and he gets dropped in the backfield. Najee Kelly.
Sets up first down and back for Cincinnati from the 8. Quarterback draw with Sorsby, and he gets swallowed up immediately. Najee Kelly atones for Russell, but he stays on side, right? He's not jumping off side. He's doing a good job in the passing game. First down, Andrew Hall on his first carry. Swallowed at the line of scrimmage. But a good job up front, too, beating the block. 55, John Walker. Editor.
Oh, look out. Kelly made the hit. The ball comes loose. Rodney Laura has it, and the officials say he's also got a touchdown.
Talked about him before. I mean, he's a problem. He's just a problem waiting to happen.
Steps up. And scooped up. It's going to be a quick 6.
To make plays. Here's Kelly Lawson right in the middle. He bluffs up and then drops back. So that when the defensive end knocks that ball out of the quarterback's hands, it's almost like a blocked kick.
Daniels will give to Williams, and Williams denied. Najee Kelly, the former Miami Hurricane, coming up with a stop. Nowhere for the running back to go, but Kelly at the top of the screen, number 9.
Big 12 today on Big 12 Radio. We are presented by Modelo and reminding you about Modelo fan rule number 15. Football offseason is not an offseason. It's recruiting season, portal season, and spring game season layered on top of each other. And spring games were all the rage this weekend across the Big 12. We'll try to get you caught up on all the headlines around spring football. Joey McGuire, Texas Tech's football coach, joins us live coming up in about 10 minutes from now, so you're not going to want to miss him. Talk through spring game, which included Brendan Sorsby making his debut for Tech. What are the big headlines for you, James? What stood out to you about what you saw and read throughout this weekend in Big 12 country?
Man, I would probably start with, number one, Sorsby's a great storyline. Spring games are something for the fans to get really excited about. Does it translate to Saturdays in the fall? No, but seeing Sorsby look really crisp and clean, I think, has Texas Tech Nation all fired up. But probably the biggest headline for me was Oklahoma State head coach Eric Morris and what he said about the shirtless section in 231 in Stillwater. He wants it to go away. And I get it. He wants, the fans in Stillwater seem to be pretty split on this. Drew Mestamaker was just throwing darts all over the field on Saturday. But after the game, Eric Morris is rocking this sick mustache. That's new. But then also, he said he's not a fan of it, and I understand the mentality. Some fans are like, oh, let him have fun, whatever, it's our thing. But he doesn't want to be a meme. He wants to be a legitimate Big 12 title contender.
You want to be a joke.
And it was a joke. And it's been a joke. And it was fun for the tail end of a 1-11 football team. But if you're going to bowl games and you're competing for Big 12 championships, which is the standard, the new standard in Stillwater, a shirtless section of dudes, it shouldn't be the headline, right? And I think that's what Eric Morris is implying, is that, hey, we want to be respected. We want opponents to be afraid of playing at Boone Pickens Stadium because the crowd is loud and rowdy and not distracted by these shirtless men between ages 20 and 50 in Section 231. So I actually think it's really awesome that he's already setting the foundation for winning football games and acting like you've been there, right? Like, this sounds like a coach who doesn't want fans storming the field. And it's not that he's taking away the fun. It's that he's trying to he's trying to, what's the word I'm looking for, magnify or re-emphasize that they have a lot of a rich history, and they expect to be a contender right away.
Here's what Eric Morris said.
So on the south side was full, and the energy in there and hearing the crowd, the roars after some explosive plays was a lot of fun. And so I'm not and I get why, like, I do kind of want to get rid of the no shirt thing spinning, like at some point, like we want to be, so like it ran its course in my opinion. There's some people out there doing it. But we're going to be winning too many damn games and not be, something that somebody can be on TV and make fun of us for something like. So that is, in my opinion, something that I would like to kind of push out at some point. And I looked up there, a bunch of grown men with their shirts off. It got me distracted at one point. So.
I don't know. To me, it could go both ways. Like, I totally get what you're talking about and like what he's talking about, but also like, it doesn't mean you're not winning. Right, it meant that last year it was exciting for the fans to go out there and have some fun at the games when they were terrible. But you can also win and have guys that are shirtless. And Section 231, they're having a good time. Those are not mutually exclusive. It's just kind of sounds funny. And I'm sure in some ways to him it represents, a really bad era of Oklahoma State football, which they're trying to further themselves from. But it could also mean like a new era. I don't know. It doesn't have to mean what it used to mean.
Well, I think, and that's a really good point. If there's a section of shirtless, again, these aren't college students, these are like bros in their 40s, right, in Section 231, that has a different meaning or a different context if Boone Pickens Stadium is completely sold out and there's 60,000 plus fans with the sticks that they're slapping on the sidewalls just beyond the opponent's bench, and it's loud and it's rowdy. It's a thing because Oklahoma State was really bad and it was all they had. They didn't have points on the scoreboard. They had an empty stadium, and it became a college football sensation. But it is something that I think people do make fun of them for, and that's what Eric Morris, who I think people think Eric Morris is like this really young, really innovative, like progressive football coach. And he is those things in terms of being progressive and innovative offensively, but he's also like a kind of has an old school demeanor about him, where discipline,
for sure,
like foundational success, culture, all those things that you think of with the Kyle Whittinghams and the older coaches of this generation, he brings to the table. So Drew Mestemaker, by the way, was 13 for 20 for 260 yards. 3 touchdowns in the spring game. He wants that to be the headline.
With the shirtless guys.
Here's
what QB2 at Houston, the number 1 player in the recruiting class in 2025, who's on campus, 2026, I beg your pardon. Here's what he said about the quarterback competition.
I mean, definitely want to play, but it's a thing where he's balling. Like, I mean, he got the hot hand. He knows the offense. He's been here, done that. And I also just ready for my opportunity whenever it comes. I mean, that's how it is.
Working in this offense, what have you liked most about it? Like, as you learned and picked it up, what are some of the things you like the most and feel most comfortable with?
Definitely just being able to talk to Coach Neighbor. He tells me, he asks me what I like, what I want to run, what do I see, what I don't see. He's just basically the eyes, and I'm just all ears, just listening, just taking it all in, and just being able to go out and showcase what he puts on paper. Shoot, as an OC, I mean, that's all you can ask for. So, my job is to go out and fulfill it.
All right, so I love that mentality for Keyshawn Henderson, who obviously comes in with, a ton of potential and I mean, a ton of acclaim, being the number 1 recruit in the 2026 class, and, basically just telling it like it is, right? Like, I want to play, but this dude balled out last year, led him to 10 wins, and he knows the offense. I'm learning it. I'm a work in progress. It's just a really refreshing mentality for a guy that, has that much hype around him.
Houston's going to be a college football playoff team by the time Keyshawn Henderson graduates or is off to the NFL, because that is an incredibly cerebral young man who gets it. This plays out beautifully for Houston because Connor Wegman's in his last year. Keyshawn Henderson can sit on the bench, sit on the sidelines, still get all the reps in practice. Also, remember, he can play 4 games and retain his red shirt. And actually, that might be 6 now moving forward. That's another one of the 8,000 things that are on the table for the NCAA. So you can still play him about half the year in a backup role. There's going to be blowout wins for Houston, I believe. Connor Wegman has also only had 1 season in which he's played the entire year completely healthy, and that was this past year, and he even got knocked out of a couple games. So Keyshawn Henderson's going to be on the field some, number 1. But then I just love the respect that he has for a Connor Wegman, who, sure, he wasn't throwing for 300 or 400 yards last year, but he had a Texas Bowl MVP performance in that win over LSU. Houston ran the table on the road. Like, he has something. He has that it factor. He's also very dual threat. They're similar quarterbacks, and yes, Henderson's more athletically gifted, but Wegman's the right guy who knows this offense better, and those are things that will translate to Henderson in the future. They are set up very, very nicely for the next 4 or 5 years at quarterback.
Yeah, at Arizona State, they had heavy hearts with their quote-unquote spring game. It was more of a spring scrimmage on Saturday, which was the final open Saturday scrimmage they were going to have. And last week, the assistant strength coach and former Arizona State Sun Devil player, Stephen Miller, passed away during a recent medical incident related to epilepsy, which he had suffered during practice on April 7th before returning to the sidelines a week later. Here is what Kenny Dillingham said about Stephen Miller.
I mean, it was rough. I mean, I recruited Steve. I mean, it was a very emotional, very, very emotional day. I mean, we canceled practice. All the guys took out to breakfast or did certain things. I know some guys went to Derek's house and Jaron Hamilton cooked breakfast for 30 guys, and it's not. I mean, it's sad. I mean, Steve's unbelievable. I mean, I recruited Steve here back when I was a GA, and then I brought him back. He was one of the first people I brought back, and he was just a ball of joy. And I hope that the kids learn that you just got to cherish every single day, because that dude brought it every day with passion and love for everybody. And, he's still watching over us.
Yeah, some really sad news. Just 29 years old, and a guy that Kenny had brought back into the program when he took over, and had him in as a GA, and then now an assistant strength coach.
Yeah, super young, 29 years old. And moments like this can really unify a team. They canceled practice, and Kenny Dillingham just has a way, when we talk about culture and connectivity, and that's the number one thing I think of when I think of Arizona State football, is just how together they are. And they're also very competitive. They've had multiple fights break out at spring practice, and some of the local media was asking him about it, and he said, relationships are built through conflict.
Yeah.
They want those competitive juices, and you want to be able to make up with the guy that you just hated 30 seconds ago. I just love his approach in terms of building toughness, building culture, and it's a really sad story. But I'm sure Kenny Dillingham will find a way to make his team better through these moments of adversity.
Well, and here is exactly what he said about that togetherness for this team this offseason. He was actually asked about, spring football, and here's what he said.
Yeah, they're fades, slants. They were doing a bunch out there today, and they're both really good football players. I think I like our football team. I like our togetherness. I like how our guys are hanging out. We have people here, and I'm hearing that 30 guys are hanging out at the same place. And that's what I always look for to see if we're building a culture and a team, is what are they doing when they don't have to be around each other. And if 30 guys are going to go hang out with each other on a Friday night, I consider that a win for our program, and I consider that a really good step for our team moving forward.
Yeah, Cutter Boley also had a really good spring game. He looks QB1, and Omarion Miller had 2 touchdown passes in that spring game as well for Arizona State. Love that clip from Kenny Dillingham talking not just about on the field, but a team that really likes to be around each other.
30 guys hanging out on a Friday night. That's it.
Yeah, just to your point about togetherness. All right, on the way next, Joey McGuire, Texas Tech football coach, joins us. We're talking spring game. We're talking NFL draft. It's all on the table with Joey McGuire next. It's Big 12 Today, presented by Modelo, heard on TuneIn, watched on Big 12 Studios.
Arizona getting exotic. It's lofted by Sorsby, and it's picked off. Dalton Johnson with the second takeaway for Arizona. That was going to remain on the sideline today. That one looks laminated. Look out here. Howland flung for a huge loss. We know he can spin it, but so do Dalton Johnson and the Cats.
Tonight getting his first career carries. Ball is loose. A lucky bounce for Bachmeier. Can he make the most of it? And that ball down the field is taken away for the second time tonight. Gotta be a good punt. Salgado Medina does get it away. And this will be touched by Kansas State.
And it goes right through his hands. And Johnson on the recovery. Johnny on the spot. Lyman being able to swing it that well. Look at this second level blitz. And the Cats get hands on it again. Dalton Johnson part of that wave. Back-to-back pass breakups.
Out of the shotgun. Jailbreak pressure. It's picked off. And it will be a pick 6 for Dalton Johnson. Wow, they got him at the 5. That was great defensive work. Wow, I thought no way they're going to catch up.
3rd and 22. Couple guys drop out. Sorsby in trouble. Gets it away complete. And he's wrestled out of bounds. Manny Covey.
This is Big 12 Radio. We are presented by Modelo, heard on TuneIn, watched on Big 12 Studios. We're joined right now by the head football coach of Texas Tech, Joey McGuire, joining us here on Big 12 Radio. And Texas Tech's spring game was moved up and was played on Friday so they can make way for George Strait to make his way into Jones AT&T. So that should be fun.
No, it's going to be great, man. The King's going to be in Lubbock. I love it.
Have you seen – I'm assuming you've seen George Strait.
I got to see him a couple years ago with Willie Nelson. So, I mean, probably one of my all-time favorite nights. I'm a huge country fan. And so probably my all-time favorite nights as far as concerts go.
What's your favorite George Strait song?
Oh, man. They Call Me the Fireman. I love that one.
Yep.
Amarillo by Morning, just because out here in West Texas, I can get to Amarillo a lot faster than I used to. But, those are two of my favorite. But my all-time favorite, and if you go to, like, 2008, 2009, 10, if I'm right, most of my guys can sing Troubadour, my Cedar Hill guys, because we would always start off practice. At the time you had CDs, so you'd burn a CD and we'd go on, we'd call it Turf and Tunes on Wednesdays. We'd go into the stadium and Troubadour was blaring.
I mean, it's funny you brought that up because you're right. Like, it's not one of the old classics. It's one of the newer ones, but yeah. I love that song.
Yeah. I still feel 25.
25.
Yeah.
I bet you do feel
I do.
25.
I do.
Man, you've got that young man energy.
Yeah.
How did you guys do your spring game? Was it like ones against ones? Did you split it 50-50? I know Sorsby had a big day. Micah Hudson looks fantastic from what I've seen. How did you guys evaluate, or how did you split up the roster, I should say?
Yeah, we went ones versus ones, and it was like each period, like we started out with a call-it period, and Jet Carpenter scored a touchdown when the first series with the ones, the defense, it was a 3-and-out. And then the ones came back out and drove the field. I mean, it was a pretty long drive, probably 12, 13 plays, and Jet Carpenter scored a touchdown from Sorsby there at the end. Then we went twos, and we went threes, and then it was all situations after that first call-it period. We had a 2-minute scenarios, an end of half, an end of game, and then we call it red zone lockout. And so the first one, that's how we ended the scrimmage. The first team to 18, offense versus defense, wins it. And defense had a hot start. Now offense came back, tied it up 12-12, and then they won it right there at the end. Micah Hudson made a big catch in the back of the end zone to win it.
What have you learned about Brendan Sorsby that maybe you didn't know about him when you recruited him?
Man, we played against him, and we won the game, but man, he lit us up. Like, he threw for like 400 yards, and then I would sit there, and as we were evaluating him, we knew he could run the football, but man, he's 235 pounds and can really run. There was one point in a 2-minute drill during spring, he pulled the ball down and, probably picked up 20 yards, and I was like, man, that's got to be a little bit what like Josh Allen looks like running. I mean, Sorsby's a big man, and he really can run.
Coach, also saw over the weekend that NC State bought out essentially the series and the return trip to Lubbock. Like, when something like that happens, number one, why won't anybody play Texas Tech? I think we know why. But, what are the emotions is it frustrating, and what are the next steps when something like this happens?
Yeah, I mean, I don't know the whole story behind it. That was Kirby can tell you. I don't know if it was something with their conference schedule. I always want to be those home and homes to be back to back. Like, you think about it. We played North Carolina State my first year, and then we didn't get to bring them to Lubbock that next year. And so you always want it like that. And the frustrating part, and, I know Dave, and I know it's out of his hands, but the frustrating part is now you're searching for games And then you're also searching, because that's a Power 4 team.
Right.
Now you're searching for a Power 4 team to play, here in Lubbock. And so it's a little bit harder to do. And that affected our North Texas game, because I was great going to North Texas with the number of home games that we had here. But then, now you're scrambling. I mean, what are you going to have to do? You're going to have to go play somebody, a Power 4 team on the road. And we don't know that yet. And so that affected a couple of games.
Yeah. You were on with Bus and the Boys a couple weeks ago or last week, and it was a great interview. And you mentioned, that Texas Tech is a disruptor of college football. What do you mean by that?
Yeah, guys, I've lived my life in this world of college football, and I've always felt like, I've rooted for certain teams, but I was always that guy as a high school coach. Man, I rooted for wherever my players went, so I follow a lot of different places, and what we're doing, man, is being done at other places and not talked about. And it's been done for a few years. I mean, if you go back to Ohio State, whenever they won a national title, they had a pretty good payroll, and it was okay. That was fine with them doing that,
Right.
I also think there's a lot of different things, like if I'm one university and I'm recruiting against another university and I lose a player to that university, as long as it's somebody that I see myself equal as, it sucks, but I'm okay with it. Man, I can understand maybe that kid wanted to go to Ohio State, but they can't wrap their mind around that kid wants to be at Texas Tech. So there's a lot of things that have gone on that everybody's okay with, as long as the nobody rocks the boat. Now all of a sudden we're rocking the boat. We're trying to tip the boat over, and they're not okay with it, I just think it's kind of hypocritical. I just think it's one of those deals of like, Tech's not supposed to be able to do that. But it's been okay for the top 5 or 6 or 10 programs over the history of the sport to do it. And then now we're doing it. We're doing it at a very high level, and we're doing it the right way. And there's a lot of people that don't like it.
Yep, totally agree, man. You just echoed a lot of the stuff we've been saying and talking about. There's this narrative out there, and it's ridiculous, and it is hypocritical. I know. Go ahead.
Go ahead. I'm sorry. Well, I just like what I love is whenever my guys, like they interviewed Trey White the other day, and Trey White could have gone anywhere in the country, and he chose to come to Texas Tech. And one thing he said, he was like, until you're here, you don't understand what's going on. Until you're in the building, you really don't understand what's going on. And we did not offer him any more money than what another 2 to 5 schools were offering him to come to Texas Tech. But whenever you walk into this building and you see the people and you see the facilities, and then we can share the same amount of money as anybody else, then there's a reason these guys are coming to Texas Tech.
Coach, I know we got a heart out with you, but real quick, what are some of the NFL scouts, general managers asking you about David Bailey and Jacob Rodriguez?
Yeah, I can't wait, man. I cannot wait till Thursday, Friday, Saturday. We're going to hear a lot of Red Raiders, and I'm proud of it. But, everybody, they always ask about personality and then how much they love football. That's the key. Guys are fixed to spend a lot of money on David Bailey, J-Rod, Lee Hunter, Romello Height, Caleb Douglas, Barron, Reggie Virgil, Skylar Gill Howard. There's going to be a lot of names called. I think we're fixed to set a record for a 7-round draft at Texas Tech. And it's all about character, and it's all about how much they love the game of football. And our guys check those boxes. And, just to go back to what we were just talking about, all those guys played their best football at Texas Tech. Say whatever you want. You cannot argue that. Turn on the tape. Because that's one thing, guys. Y'all know that. Tape doesn't lie. That's who you are as a player whenever you put that tape on. And they played their best football at Texas Tech. And so that's another reason a lot of guys are coming here, because they understand that we're going to put them in great position to play at a high level.
Great stuff. Yeah, the eye in the sky does not lie. A program record,
Nope.
8 players invited to the Combine from Texas Tech, so should be a record-setting draft for Texas Tech. Reckham, always great to visit with you, Coach.
Thanks, Coach.
Sorry I don't have longer, guys. I appreciate y'all.
Oh, appreciate you very much. You're the best. Joey McGuire, Texas Tech's football coach, joining us here on Big 12 Radio, along with James Westling. I'm Ari Temkin. Great stuff, as always, to visit with Coach McGuire. He's always extremely gracious with lending us his time and talking through some, interesting storylines. And, yeah, I mean, look, we'll continue to talk about it. Like, for some reason, everybody else spends money nationally. Texas Tech's, in the top 10 probably of money spent, but somewhere in the top 10, maybe the lower end.
Yep.
And nobody talks about the other teams in the top 10. It's always with Texas Tech, like, well, it's money. Oh, yeah? Where is it elsewhere?
They were on the lower end of the top 10 last year.
Yeah.
And there were a lot of teams spending more that weren't even sniffing the college football playoff. But Texas Tech was there because they bought their team and their players. It is hypocrisy. And I love the very specific example he gave of Trey White, who chose Texas Tech when he could have actually probably made more at other programs. But like Joey said, you don't understand it until you're there. In Lubbock, in the football complex, you see the culture and how they can get you to the next level. This NFL draft is going to be phenomenal for Texas Tech and the Big 12 to see all these guys getting drafted who had their best season. That's a great point. As he said that, I'm rattling off in my brain all these guys.
Yeah.
I'm like, they did have their best year at Texas Tech. Romello Height is a great example of that. Bounced around school to school, blew up at Texas Tech. He's going to get drafted.
Yeah, even David Bailey. You'd think he couldn't, get better, but the dude played his best football at Texas Tech. Lee Hunter, another guy. Mm-hmm. It's Big 12 today on Big 12 Radio. We are presented by Modelo, heard on TuneIn, watched on Big 12 Studios. All right, our NFL Draft preview continues with the From Saturdays to Sundays series. A look at the Big 12 and NFL Draft, and we're zeroed in now on the Territorial Cup. We're talking Arizona and Arizona State football next. With James Westling, I'm Ari Temkin. It's Big 12 today, presented by Modelo, heard on TuneIn, watched on Big 12 Studios.
Attack the defense with your mind. Here he is. Morton. It's a deep ball. Left sideline. Dropping it right in for Virgil. Oh, what a ball from Baron Morton. Beautiful pass. I mean, that's a big league throw. That is a clinic again to Reggie Virgil for a first down.
This is a BB. Like, that is a difficult throw to make, and what a catch. Williams stays in. Play fake. Morton well protected. Spins one. End zone. Caught! He drops it in the bucket. Coy Aiken reels it in. 42 yards.
Downfield strike.
12 Radio, along with James Westling. I'm Ari Temkin. Great to have you with us today and every day here on your home for the Big 12 Conference. Tune in Big 12 Studios. A reminder, if you have not yet already, to download the TuneIn app where you can stream us live every single morning from 7 to 10 a.m. Central, 8 to 11 Eastern Time. And, of course, if you want to watch us, Big12Studios.com is the place where you can find all of the platforms where you can stream us every single morning. Amazon Prime Video, DirecTV, YouTube, Roku, Tubi, plenty of places to find myself and James Westling each and every weekday morning from 8 to 11 Eastern, 7 to 10 Central. All right, we have been bringing you from Saturdays to Sundays, Big 12 and the NFL Draft, and each and every day, these last couple of weeks in the lead up to the draft, we're talking through draft prospects from every team, then taking a look at each position group specifically, and we've zeroed in now on Arizona and Arizona State with a ton of prospects to discuss. James, where do you want to start?
Man, I'd probably start with Arizona State because there's two guys that I think are first-round worthy, and that would be wide receiver Jordan Tyson and then the big offensive tackle, whose last name I have butchered so many times I don't even try anymore. Saw in a mock draft that the Chiefs were projected to maybe take him at like pick 29, which this guy's only been playing professional football for 5 years. We talked a lot about him last week. He's going to be a star, I believe, in the NFL. He's incredibly raw. He added a bunch of weight. He went to a junior college, East LA, and started as a tight end. He's from Nigeria. Like, he grew up playing basketball and soccer because those were the sports in Nigeria that he could play. And then
Max Ahanachor, by the way.
Ahanachor.
You don't. Does.
Ahanachor.
Yeah.
Max Ahanachor
There you go.
is the guy that we're talking about. 6'6", 321 pounds. Number 30 overall prospect, like according to Pro Football Focus. Mel Kiper kind of has him in that same range. I don't know how he was second team all Big 12 when I look at all of his numbers last year.
Well, because of the other tackles.
The other really good offensive line.
Caleb Lomu and Spencer Fano, who are both going to be first-round picks.
Great point. So the guy had like 500 snaps without allowing a single sack last year. Only allowed 3 hits on quarterbacks in his final season. Maybe like the best prospect in terms of underrated, like multiple ESPN analysts think he could be a top 5 tackle in this class. And it's a deep tackle class. So he's going to be a steal for somebody in the late first, early second. He's also one of these guys that somebody that maybe has multiple picks in the first round. If there's trades where somebody lands 2 or 3 picks in the first round, I could actually see him going higher than his projection based off of his upside. If it's a league about upside, I can't find a tackle on the board that has more upside outside of him.
Right. In terms of what you mentioned, how long or not long he's played organized football, this is, a big-time prospect and a guy that still has a ton of growth but has shown a really strong ability. And I agree. I think he's a guy that probably ends up going higher than 30 because if you're looking, most teams are looking for tackle help. Everybody's at some point probably looking for tackle help.
Yep.
And this is a guy that can immediately step in and do that. Now, Jordan Tyson's really interesting because he can go the opposite way. I could see him falling based on his injury history. He had, a devastating knee injury in Colorado in 2022. He transferred to Tempe and then became the Sun Devils' go-to receiver in his final 2 seasons. 136 catches, 1,800 yards, 18 touchdowns over his final 21 games. The problem was he missed 34% of his team's games over the past 4 years because of various injuries. The collarbone had him out of the Big 12 championship and subsequent playoff in his junior season. And then, of course, this past year, missed a ton of time due to injuries as well. So that's the one knock on Tyson. But, he's really good route runner. He's really good when the play breaks down in terms of his ability to improvise and get open. Tyson I really like as a prospect.
Yeah, me too. And I think the thing that he will benefit from, which is on the opposite end of the spectrum, is Ahanachor, is it's not a real deep wide receiver room this year in the NFL draft. Like the third receiver off the board is expected to be the kid from Texas A&M who coming into the combine was like a 2nd or 3rd round pick. But Tyson's injury concerns I do think are warranted. And they date back to 2022. He has been bruised and battered and missed time each of the last 4 seasons. When he was at Colorado, he tore his left ACL, MCL, and PCL.
Yeah.
Missed all of 2023. Then he gets to Arizona State, and they unlock his potential, which I think Hines Ward was a huge part of that and one of the most underrated assistants in the entire country, definitely in the conference. When he's on the field, there's no question he can be a star. But how much can he be on the field? On the flip side of that, there have been a lot of NFL receivers who have gone through injury issues and then still been stars or very productive. Like you look at George Pickens. Why did he fall? He broke his leg. Well, he was the 3rd leading receiver in the NFL this past season for the Cowboys. You look at Jerry Jeudy, high draft pick, injury issues his first 3 or 4 years in the NFL, 1,000-yard receiver when Cleveland had no quarterback. This past year, he had almost 800 yards, again, with no quarterback. So, like, guys, if there's one position, it's not like a running back or an offensive lineman who tear an ACL. At receiver, it seems to be the position where guys can recover, not necessarily the fastest, but to getting back to the previous version of themselves more than any other position.
Keith Abney is a high-level, cornerback who kind of the opposite of Jordan Tyson, extremely durable, finished his career with 26 straight starts. He's a Dallas area native, eventually settled in Waxahachie, Texas, which is, just outside the Dallas area. And then, of course, famously, we talked a ton about this during media days, a very high-level competitive inline skater as a kid. He won 4 national championships, but won his first inline skating national championship at just the age of 9. In 7th grade, he won the 2017 USA Roller Sports National Championship in Lincoln, Nebraska, and set a new national record in the 300-meter indoors. He was also setting a national record in the 200 and was going to take that a long way, except for COVID, and that shut a lot of the rinks down, which then allowed him to focus on football, and the rest is history.
This is why I love the NFL draft. What a story. A speed skating national champion, won a national championship in 7th grade, broke multiple indoor records, like you said, the 200 and the 300 meter, and then he's also super smart. He's a member of Arizona State's Honors College. He's got a high football IQ, probably had his best game against BYU. There were 35 passing plays in that game, and he locked down an entire third of the field. He was only targeted 1 time, 0 completions in that game, and he's just, to your point, very durable. Started all 12 games in back-to-back seasons, 2024 and 2025. I see, like, his draft range all over the board. I see him projected as a high-end CB2, and then I see him as going completely undrafted. So where does he go? Nobody knows come this week, but I like his upside.
Yeah, no, agreed. Bit undersized, 5'9", 5'10", 188 pounds, but one of the most productive corners in the FBS, registering 21 passes defended and 5 interceptions over his final 25 starts. And a guy that saw a ton of targets and took advantage of those. All right, Keyshawn Elliott is another very high-level producer, a former quarterback who plays with a great level of intelligence. He combined for more than 300 career tackles, first at New Mexico State and then, of course, at Arizona State. Was the only player from a power conference in 2025 with 90-plus tackles, 14-plus tackles for loss, and 7-plus sacks. So this is a big-time playmaker.
Former 3-star recruit out of Richmond High School in a small town in Missouri, where he played quarterback, linebacker, and punter.
Dan Lanning's high school.
Dan Lanning?
Went to high school at Richmond, Missouri.
That's a fun fact. Nice drop. A Richmond powerhouse, not the Spiders. So he only had one power conference offer out of high school, and it was Kansas. But he had built a relationship with Jerry Kill, who had the health issues at Minnesota and then was on staff a little bit at Kansas State, ended up at New Mexico State, and because of that relationship, that's why he goes to New Mexico State. He also won a Missouri State championship in the 4x200, so he has good track speed. He ran a 4.58 40, which is a very, very solid time for a linebacker at 6'2", 233. I think somebody takes a flyer on him.
Anybody we're missing? I mean, Xavier Alford is a guy that certainly could get drafted, will get some looks, but I think most of what I've seen on him is late day 3 or UDFA. There's a few other guys as well in that conversation for Arizona State, including Shimon Mateer, who I think could and should be drafted. Sort of surprised of how he's tested in terms of his, how much higher I thought his athleticism would be. Probably a guy that should have returned to Arizona State, but and then Jordan Crook, Miles Rouser, Justin Watley, just a few others that could be priority UDFAs out of Arizona State.
Yeah, and all of those guys were super productive at Arizona State. I mean, this series sheds some light on what these teams have lost due to graduation or guys going pro early. Mateer, when he was on the field, he looks like a wide receiver with his foot speed and his straight line speed, but why wasn't he more productive in terms of catches and yards when Arizona State leans on that position a ton? He's listed as a kind of back-end prospect at tight end, and it's actually a really deep tight end class. I mean, there's probably 5 or 6 tight ends from right here in the Big 12 that'll get a look and maybe get drafted.
We talked about one of the corners in Keith Abney. We go to Arizona now. We will talk about Tre'Dan Stukes, the other corner, coming up in our series as it continues as we break down position by position. Corners will be next. But as we take a look at Arizona State, or rather Arizona, Genesis Smith is certainly a name that stands out. There's lots of players as a part of Arizona's cornerback secondary room that are going to hear their names called in the draft. Genesis Smith is certainly one of them. 6'2", 202 pounds. He's projected as a round 3, round 4 guy who, I think, like, athletically he tests. I mean, he's long, he's lanky. I think this plays into why a lot of there's a lot of hype on the Arizona secondary. Now, he does have some question marks in terms of his physicality and his ability to stick his nose in the run game as a defender, and how much he likes contact, but he's a guy that generated turnovers for an Arizona secondary that generated a lot of turnovers.
Yeah, he's definitely a cover, corner, or safety. They list him as a safety at 6'2", 202. He had a really nice vertical, like 42.5 inches, had a really nice broad jump. He's a local kid from Chandler, Arizona. Again, a 3-star recruit who at DBU, which is Arizona, developed into an all-league player. He had 77 tackles, 8 pass breakups this past year, 3rd-team all-league, and he just fits the prototypical NFL safety in terms of his size and his length. He needs to get more physical, but his ability to follow and track and position relative to where the quarterback is looking is top-notch, according to multiple NFL scouts and draft savants. He's got a 4th-round grade, so I think he definitely gets drafted somewhere between the 4th and the 5th round. And again, he's going to continue this long lineage of Arizona members of the secondary that continue to get drafted on draft day.
Another one of those would be Dalton Johnson, the safety from Katy, Texas, who's a 5th-year senior and was a 3-year starter at Arizona. He actually had 4 defensive coordinators in 5 seasons in the program, became a starter as a sophomore, and pretty much posted consistent tackle numbers over the course of each season, with his best production coming this past year as he tied for the team lead in 2025 with 4 interceptions. So a guy that steadily got better as he advanced in his career at Arizona. But I think this is a guy very well-rounded at the safety position. He can tackle. He can play in coverage. He's got good size. For me, he's one of the best upside safeties in this draft in Dalton Johnson.
Yeah, and he was there for all the ups and downs that Arizona's had. 5-7, 10-3 breakthrough, then 4-8, and then 9-4. He was even a redshirt freshman on the team that went 1-11. He had the 7th most tackles in the Big 12 this past year, but he's a little bit undersized. He's only 5'10", as you noted. He had 11 pass breakups, but 286 career tackles at Arizona. The smaller frame is probably what's holding him back. Aiden Garnes is another guy who had a really nice 40, ran a 4.37. Only spent 1 year at Arizona, was part of kind of their nickel package, but part of a secondary that finished with just a ridiculous passing efficiency rating, number 1 in the country. He had an interception and broke up 8 passes. And then the other Arizona prospect is probably Ty Buchanan, who's got great size at 6'6", 314 pounds. He's experienced. He brings a lot of versatility on the offensive line. He can play at guard or tackle. but he's projected to be a late day 3 or undrafted free agent.
The other one would be Chris Hudson.
Hudson,
that's
transfer,
right.
Yep.
5'11", 175 pound, a guy that's likely day 3 or UDFA, Georgia Tech transfer. And in a wide receiver room that needed guys to emerge, he was one of the big players after T-Mac. His third team All Big 12, and obviously 6 targets for 24 yards and a 24-19 loss in their bowl game this past year. So I think between Arizona and Arizona State, we're probably talking about 4 to 5 players drafted, maybe 6. But in the secondary for Arizona, they were the number 1, pass defense in college football, and for good reason. They've got 3 guys that are getting drafted, and one of them we'll talk about next as we go from Saturdays to Sundays, breaking down the cornerbacks that will get drafted out of the Big 12. With James Wesley, I'm Ari Temkin. We are presented by Modelo, heard on TuneIn, watched on Big 12 Studios.
Still looking downfield, and it's intercepted. Trey Stukes, first of all, made a great play to pick that one off.
Be successful. Pick up the blitz. Salter's in trouble. The game is really moving too fast for him right now. Stukes again comes through to get him on a loss of 2.
He's got time. His pass to the sideline is intercepted. Traden Stukes with a purloined pigskin.
Robertson has to check it down. And again, Arizona is there to crunch it. Traden Stukes leads the defense.
Johnson is hit, and he is dropped. Traden Stukes was shot out of a cannon.
He's ready to pressure because the safety got him capped. And what's he do? Runs through the back and gets to Avery Johnson.
Sawyer Robertson looking for the lead. Intercepted instead. Traden Stukes on his senior day.
This is Big 12 Today on Big 12 Radio as we continue our From Saturdays to Sundays Big 12 Draft Series presented by Modelo. The draft starts Thursday. Huge week for college football and the National Football League. As many of these players that we've watched and seen growing up over the years will hear their names called as part of the 2026 NFL Draft class. We've been talking through each and every school and program, listing out their players that are that are going to be drafted or could be drafted, and we're also going through position by position. At some point, those will all come together, and we'll get to a point where we've done all of the players, but there's been some where we haven't done yet, and so corners is where we are right now. And one corner we did not focus on when we talked about Arizona would be Tre'Davious Stukes. Tre'Davious Stukes, the corner from Arizona, a former walk-on. Stukes played under 3 different head coaches and 5 different defensive coordinators over his college career. Versatility is the name of his game, and I think the ability for him to have played under multiple head coaches and coordinators and played multiple spots under all of those coordinators shows just how versatile he is. But he was primarily an outside corner his first 3 seasons, then moved inside after that. 1,100 career snaps at nickel, 943 at outside, and 503 at safety. He'll be 25 early in this NFL season, so that's probably one of the knocks on him in terms of his age. But a 4.0 GPA in high school and made the Big 12 academic honor roll. So smart kid, and I think he's going to be the highest of the Arizona players selected in this draft.
Yeah, made the honor roll 3 times at Arizona and comes from a football family. His dad played college ball at Pacific University and in the Arena Football League. Who's the most famous athlete alum from Pacific? Anybody? Michael Olowokandi.
Oh, of course, yes.
Number 1 pick, 1998.
Doubtful that he's the most famous alum. Why are you shortchanging Pacific?
Athletic-wise.
Got it, okay.
Athletic-wise. But career totals look really good. Like 7 picks, over 200 tackles, was all Big 12 this past year with 52 stops, 10 pass breakups. Love his versatility, love his size at 6'1", 6'2", really, really strong in zone coverage. So he's definitely probably the first Arizona Wildcat off the board. ESPN's Miller has him as the number 10.
Matt Miller?
Thank you. Matt Miller has him as the number 10 rated cornerback in the draft overall, which translates probably to a 2nd or 3rd round pick.
What's interesting is the cornerback position overall in the Big 12, not great in terms of draft prospects. Last year the Big 12 had 0 cornerbacks selected in the 1st round. And, when you look and go back, like it's not been the richest position group, especially of late. I see 2 names that could get drafted in this draft. And it's funny because we're doing both corners in Arizona and Arizona State on the same day. And so the other corner here we've been talking about is Keith Abney. Keith Abney and Tre'Davious Stukes are the 2 names that I see that could potentially get drafted at the cornerback position. Again, on the same day we're doing Arizona and Arizona State, so go figure.
Right. And there's a couple of guys that might get drafted past those 2. Latrell McCutcheon Sr. from Houston, originally from Austin, Texas. He's like 6'2", 180 pounds, really long-armed, had 51 tackles and was 2nd team all Big 12. But he had 0 career interceptions in 48 college games. Did run a 4.43 40. He had the best shuttle time and the best 3-cone of any cornerback at the combine. So he has exceptional foot quickness. ESPN's Matt Miller has him drafted anywhere between like a 4th and a 7th round pick. He was a tackling machine. Really good tracking ability, really good skills just in terms of form tackling. So he's probably like the 3rd guy that jumps out looking at all the prospect lists. He seems to be the general consensus, like the 3rd guy. And then maybe a couple others get a look from TCU's got a kid, Channing Canada.
Michael Coates from West Virginia is another name. You mentioned Aiden Garnes. We talked about Arizona as a potential draft pick. Maury Baba from BYU. These are names going deep down the list of potential cornerback prospects.
Preston Hodge, maybe. He led the Big 12 in pass breakups, the corner from Colorado, but he also played quite a bit of safety. Came over from Liberty. He transferred to Colorado with Caden Salter. Doesn't have like super impressive career numbers until last year, and he only ran a 4.56 40. That could hold him back. But then, so I went and I looked at the Big 12 all-conference teams from last year and tried to find, like, how many of these guys are gone versus how many are coming back.
Right.
Well, the first team defensive backs are all going to get drafted. Dalton Johnson from Arizona, Tre'Dan Stukes from Arizona, Keith Abney from Arizona State. Tanner Wall is a safety from BYU. He's not a corner, but he maybe is a late-round pick. The only one coming back is Bryce Pollock, who's heading back to Texas Tech. He was maybe the number one corner in the conference this past year. And then the second-team guys are guys that are going to get drafted, like a Bud Clark or a Latrell McCutcheon. Smith Snowden is the only one that transferred out to a different school. So it was kind of safety heavy in terms of the headliners in the Big 12 when you think about Bud Clark, when you think about Johnson or Stukes, who kind of played more safety than they did even corner in that hybrid defensive backfield for Arizona.
Well, and what's interesting is, so Stukes is listed as the 8th best corner according to Dane Brugler, so he's top 10. Keith Abney's 9th. Takario Davis is 14th. Remember, Takario Davis is the former Arizona corner who transferred after last season to Washington and actually probably hurt his draft status in his transfer to Washington to be with his former head coach and Jed Fish. So you think about just the corners that Fish, even his predecessors, had brought in. I mean, what an insanely good secondary with guys. I mean, these are 4 guys that are all going to get drafted, whether they be at corner or safety. And that includes Takario Davis, who, again, who spent the season last year at Washington.
Right, and Takario Davis was probably their best corner last year. And I remember when we're going through our portal series being like, who's going to step up and fill that void? They had no experience coming back in the secondary. They are a machine. Whatever they're doing down in Tucson in terms of the defensive backfield, to lead the country in passing efficiency defense back-to-back seasons is remarkable. And they have Chip Viney's the cornerbacks coach, Brett Orse is the safeties coach, both coming back, and then Danny Gonzalez, the defensive coordinator, has just done a phenomenal job to continue to have guys shine and get drafted from that program. They are a DB factory.
Well, let me ask you something. Are you concerned, Big 12, big picture overall, about the cornerback situation, or do you think this is more of a blip?
Yeah, I'm not. I wouldn't say concerned. When I think about like all the programs that have had guys drafted over the year, I mean, Iowa State would probably have been the headliner, but their top 3 defensive backs got injured this year. That decimated their secondary with Williams and Cooper and Neal all missing time. 2 of those 3, maybe all 3, would have been drafted, and they've all 3 transferred to try and rebuild their draft stock for next season. Kansas State traditionally has corners that get drafted about every year. They have a safety that's going to get drafted in VJ Payne for this draft. I think they'll be, back on the board probably next season or the year after, especially with the corners that they have coming in, like the kid from Virginia. And so I just think Arizona and Arizona State's kind of, now they have the pedigree of getting guys drafted from the secondary just about every year. This will be back-to-back years for both schools. And then Bryce Pollock at Texas Tech, there's been a massive uptick in terms of their secondary. Like Mo Horn transferred out because he didn't see being on the field very much next year. So he transfers to Oklahoma State, where he's probably their number 1 corner. Tells you a lot about the strength of that position. And then TCU seems to have guys getting drafted every year, and that might continue this year with the Canada kid.
Yeah, I mean, Shamari Simmons at Arizona State, to your point, is a guy that will probably be drafted in 2027. LeVar Thornton, a Baylor corner, probably the most underrated corner in the Big 12 heading into next season. Is a guy that could be on the radar. I also think like BYU's got a good grouping of corners at this point this year that will be on the radar for NFL teams next year at the corner position. So, yeah, I'm with you. I mean, I think, look, the Big 12 has gotten more physical. They've got, they deploy a lot more running games in terms of versus the pass game. So I think that's going to, kind of change the dynamic. I don't know how much press corner coverage we see in the Big 12. You wonder how much NFL teams evaluate players based on that. So I think there's multiple factors. I don't think it's a huge deal, but it is something worth looking at.
Yeah, there's only 3 or 4 corners projected to go in the first round, and 2 of them are from Tennessee, the same school. So then you've got San Diego State. Sure, you've got Ohio State. You've got Texas, but I think collectively, like the Big 12 has very much held its own historically at this position, and I do think this year is just kind of a blip on the radar.
Big 12 today on Big 12 Radio, along with James Westling. I am Ari Temkin. Anything else at the cornerback position as we break down the draft from a cornerback perspective here on the From Saturdays to Sundays series?
I mean, I like looking ahead to 2027. And remember, like the Big 12 lost their number one corner this past draft in Travis Hunter, right, who was playing both sides of the ball. So the downtick, I think, is natural. For next year, like Bryce Pollock is expected to be a top 8 corner off the board. Returning for his senior season, which is remarkable that, one of many guys coming back for Texas Tech that probably could have been drafted this year. Let's see, Jamel Johnson is coming back at TCU. He'll be a highly drafted player, led the Big 12 in interceptions this past year. Former 4-star recruit who chose TCU over Texas and Oklahoma and Alabama and Oregon is the other one that I forgot there. So, like, one high-level defensive back transferring out in Smith Snowden that were on the all Big 12 teams. All the other guys are just graduating. I think says a lot about the league and the strength in the defensive backfield.
Yeah, well said. All right, that's James Westling. I am Ari Temkin. Plenty more to come on our From Saturdays to Sundays series as we continue to break down the draft prospects to know the strengths, the weaknesses, and where they might get slotted and drafted. As we mark our way through that series. We still haven't, I don't think we've gotten to Texas Tech yet, have we?
No.
And they may set a record with players drafted this year. 8 sent to the Combine, that's a record. So we'll see if all 8 of those guys and even more get drafted.
Who do we have tomorrow, T-Chains?
Tomorrow we're doing defensive ends, and we're doing Utah and Houston.
See, defensive end is a really strong position for the Big 12, not just for this draft, but for future drafts. And I also think the Big 12 in the portal cleaned up at that position.
Big 12 today, Big 12 Radio. Let's talk corners with the former Texas Tech corner Marcus Coleman. He was with the Jets, the Texans, and the Cowboys as well in an NFL career. Marcus Coleman visits with us next. With James Amari, this is Big 12 Today, presented by Modelo, heard on TuneIn, watched on Big 12 Studios.
Broken up. Latrell McCutcheon is a bad dude.
And McCutcheon absolutely changes this ball game.
Levitt thought about taking a shot. Instead, he takes his shot from Latrell McCutcheon. And McCutcheon with bad intentions on that hit on Levitt.
Mack, the second, is playing a defensive end spot. And Buren crushed on the corner blitz. There's Latrell McCutcheon Sr. First sack of the season, and it was a loud one.
Out of an empty set. Murphy finds Wells, can't hold on. And they rule that incomplete. Latrell McCutcheon, who Willie Fritz believes is an NFL player with the PBU.
Well, he is some player, not afraid to make tackles either.
High snap. Welch wrestled down the backfield. That's Latrell McCutcheon,
a willing tackler. You know, he's a guy he only goes about 185 pounds at 6'1".
Another bad snap and exchange, and McClan has to run for it. He lost his hat. McCutcheon absolutely changes this ball game.
That's 126 nationally. Awful. Quick toss. Man. Gets popped. The ball is out, and it's out of bounds. 2 leaping Cougars defenders, and Latrell McCutcheon and Sione Fotu
This is Big 12 Today on Big 12 Radio. We are presented by Modelo as we talk draft. Thursday, the first round of the 2026 NFL Draft. Fridays, rounds 2 and 3. The rest of the draft on Saturday. And we'll be visiting here with Marcus Coleman, the former defensive back for Texas Tech. Had a great career in the NFL as well, and now the special teams coordinator with UTRGV. Marcus, how are you? No, he's not there yet.
Love the enthusiasm. Are we going to do our own Big 12 Today mock draft? Like, maybe just the top 10 picks?
Yeah, it's a good idea.
See how it shakes out?
Should we just do like a quick 7-round mock?
Like Jordan Reed of ESPN, who's been on our program multiple times, did this weekend. How long does it take to put together a 7-round NFL mock draft?
Well, I mean, if I plug in the variables to AI, I could probably do it pretty quickly. But if I want to do it right, it's going to take some time.
He's old
days.
School. He's old school.
And you got to put your entire draft board together. All right, let's talk now with Marcus Coleman, former Texas Tech defensive back. Played for the Jets, Texans, and Cowboys in his NFL career, and now a football coach, special teams coordinator for UTRGV. Marcus, how are you?
Doing well. How you guys doing this morning?
Doing great. Appreciate your time. Thanks for jumping on with us as we talk through the cornerback position, which has not been very rich in the Big 12 this year in terms of draft. I mean, there's 2 guys, both at Arizona and Arizona State, that are, potentially getting drafted. One guy at Tech, your alma mater, that will get drafted next year, and he's returning to college. Just kind of give us your overall thoughts on the cornerback position in 2026.
Overall, for this draft,
or just the position and where it is, and the skill set needed to play it.
In regards to the position just itself, I mean, obviously the cornerbacks get a lot more opportunities than the guys did. During my time, we were coming out. The league is more, football in general is more spread out. A lot of different formations, but a lot of different route concepts and things like that. And credit to offensive coordinators for being innovative and coming up with different ways to attack them. But from a technical standpoint, a lot of that hasn't changed. My top 3 things if you're going to play defensive back, particularly in the NFL, you got to be able to tackle. You have to be able to play man-to-man coverage, and you have to be able to play the deep ball. I mean, period. The end. You can learn how to work in space. If you're playing cover 2, cover 3, things like that. But those are the 3 necessities that you need. Obviously, it helps if you're a 4-3 guy or 4-4 guy, things like that. But there are guys that were 4 or 5 guys and 4 or 6 guys that played a long time as well because they were technically sound. So just kind of looking at the position and watching college now, I do see, and it's particularly at the the players are the right way. And they're being taught the correct techniques in order to play the position. I'd like to see that trend, continue as well. And we all do a lot of the same drills and implemented a lot of the same things. It's just about how you teach it and help guys get to the next level.
Is the college game and the NFL super similar, or are there differences in terms of how much freedom the wide receiver has on routes and just the rules that have been implemented?
No, I think they're vastly different. You have to look at it from this angle. So in college, you only get so much time to be with players. The NFL, there were guys all day. So there are more route concepts. There are more concepts out of different formations. You do have some colleges that try to get into multiple formations. But they can still only limit the route concepts because of the lack of time that they have. So, making a jump from college to the NFL, even if some of the terminology is the same, you're going to get a few more different route concepts. In regards to like the conversion and the freedom, that is kind of on par. I think most of it is just, route concepts, how you attack. And the freedom really comes with guys that are experienced, wide receivers in the NFL. Like a Jefferson or, someone like that, or a Cooper Kupp or, a Puka. Those guys, they probably have freedom, to make adjustments just because they have that trust. And they don't have to worry about them, making a mistake or, running a route into the wrong coverage. That trust is there, so they have the ability to, kind of earn that freedom. But for the most part, you know, the route concepts that are put in are put in for a reason. If you're a number one guy and you're running somebody off, obviously somebody's coming underneath or coming from the other side. So, it just kind of depends on really kind of the coordinator, the experience, and what the offense entails, to allow that freedom.
Talk with Marcus Coleman here. I'm curious for what advice you'd give to corners as they, get ready for the draft. What advice would you give them?
Man, the main advice I would give them is because they should be able to have access to film now. I would say watch film. Start watching offenses early. Go ahead and start doing that. Secondly, in regards to the workouts, yes, everybody's going to work out and do those things, but do the drills that are applicable to the game itself. Breaking that 45 degrees. Whether it be man turn or zone turns, working on playing the deep ball, working on 90-degree breaks. Working on downhill, breaks, things like that. That's all you can, really do right now. But really focus on, learning how to watch film at the NFL level, because yes, you can watch film at the college level, but once you move up to the NFL level, there's a whole nother way, a whole nother aspect of watching film that you have to increase as well. So really, I'd say start, watching as much NFL film as you can. Make sure you're doing drills that are applicable, to the game. So you're not going into mini camp or OTAs, things like that, rusty. Because there are a lot of guys and they have their trainers and they're doing all these crazy drills, and some of these drills I see and I've never done some of the drills that they do. I was like, I've never done that in a game in my life. So make sure you're doing drills that transfer to the game, that you're going to do in the game. So right now, that's all you can do. And really, work on body position and tackling, just do the things that apply to the game. And it'll help you, once you get your opportunity, you get into camp, it helps to see that you put the time in to actually, do the work.
Marcus, talking with Marcus Coleman, first-team All-American back in 1995 at Texas Tech, sixth in NCAA history with 4 pick sixes, career interception returns for touchdowns. So, Marcus, now that you have your coaching hat on, how much of evaluating defensive backs is instincts? And, what are the things you look for when you see a prospect and you're like, I can mold him into something great?
That's a good question, because I do probably look at guys a little differently than some other guys do, just because, yes, I see the measurables. If a kid is, 6'1", 195, I'm like, okay, yes, good looking kid. Or he's 190, 185 or whatever it is. I can see that. Obviously, you can see his speed. You want to see, his lateral quickness. And really, you want to see, I look at, what does his gait look like? How is his base, particularly in like press coverage? What does that look like? Is he a guy that, is he off balance a lot? Is he late reacting to, the receiver's movements? Where's his hand placement when he does get the opportunity to jam a guy in press? And then how does he play the ball? Does he touch the ball? Whether that's, PBUs, whether that's punching the ball out, whether it's, making interceptions, how well does he play the ball? And then also that other area, the instinctual part that you talk about, if you're playing zone coverage, does he recognize routes coming from the other side? Is he able to see, beforehand, what offenses are going to do? So, I'll make sure, really, I kind of move away from, putting so much emphasis on measurables, probably more so than other people do. And I look at all the other intangible factors, or tangible factors, I should say, that play a part in playing defensive back. Where his eyes, because I can look at a guy's helmet and I can tell where his eyes are when he's playing the route. Is he looking at the far hip? Is he looking at the near hip? Where his eyes? Is he looking at the helmet? Does he have an understanding of what routes are coming to him? Based off the coverage that they're playing, and just how fast does he come out of his breaks? Is he fast out of his 45 breaks? Is he fast breaking 90? Breaking on digs? Can he climb high on the post? Things like that. So, it's really, really fun, being on this end and using my experience and, from what I've learned from other guys that I played with and use it to evaluate, high school kids, college kids and see, who fits, who try to predict, who's going to be a good player. And then after that, I think the main part is actually, talking to them, learning, okay, let me see, what this young man's about, who's in his life, whether it be parents, guardian, authoritative figure. How's his work ethic? Does he love the game? Which I think is, kind of the number one question, a lot of coaches ask, like, do you really love this or do you just kind of like it? Or do you like it a lot? Because if you're going to trying to go to the next level, you have to love this. This is something that, you have to love, and you're going to have to sacrifice some things, and your life is going to be different. And, I want to see, if the young man understands that. So that's kind of how I evaluate guys when I'm looking at them and when I'm talking to them.
I mean, what do you think is the best gauge for, like, do you really love football?
Really, it's the work. And you can tell when somebody loves football. It's and I'll use myself as an example. Everybody else was going to homecoming and going to, I was working out or at state track meet. So you can tell when somebody loves something when they come and put the time in. That's all they want to talk about is that. They don't come up missing. When you're having meetings or things like that, or on random, random days, you get a young man, texting you about coverage. Yeah, coach, I'm just sitting there watching film. Hey, I just wanted to ask you about such and such. Being on the phone for an hour, and it's not like a one-time thing. Like, it happens all the time. And I've had several young men that were like that. So I mean, you can, and they stay after practice. They get in and do things before practice. They don't necessarily have to be, first in, first person to leave, last person, first person in, last person to leave. But when they're there, they do the work, they do the extra work while they're there, and then they do the extra work while they're at home. So you can feel, and really you can see who loves the game or not.
Talking with Marcus Coleman, who is still on NFL films because he had some ridiculous pick sixes. A 98-yard pick six against Dan Marino on Monday Night Football back in 2000. Still owned the Texans franchise record for longest pick six, 102 yards against the Kansas City Chiefs. Like, that was your thing. You had so many interceptions returned for touchdowns. After you make the interception, what goes through your mind that led to so many pick sixes?
Well, you turn into a wide receiver. And growing up, when I was younger, I played wide receiver and defensive back. So once the ball is in my hands, I'm trying to get to the end zone. So you have to mentally flip that switch and go from defender to now you're the receiver. And so obviously the big thing on defense is, one of the biggest things is getting takeaways and trying to score on defense. I can honestly say every defensive coordinator, head coach, I should say, put a lot of emphasis on scoring defense, and that's not just necessarily holding the offense to 4 points, once they get down in the red zone. We're talking about fumble recoveries for touchdowns, INTs for touchdowns. So that's always been something that's, been embedded within my mind. And, my father and I used to talk about it all the time. So that was just something, that it became natural to me, after a while. So once I got the ball, whether it was off a fumble or off an interception, I was trying to get to the house. So that's kind of where that comes from. You just kind of develop that, once it's a learned behavior and it's, one of those behaviors that are really good. And, fortunately I was able to convert.
Yeah. What do you remember about your draft experience?
Man, my draft experience was good. At the same time, it was a lot of pressure because the draft then is a lot different than it is now. Like, guys have like a whole week, and they have all this time in between. They can go hang out in the city and do all this crap. For us, it was you flew in on Friday night, Saturday morning, you up at like 5:30, and it was just like herding cattle, dude. Like, it was you come down in the hotel, they pick you up, they take you to your first station. You do the height and weight. You do all that stuff. You do the 225, and then you go out. You start doing drills. You're doing interviews, doing things like that. And like, dude, you're there like a day and a half, and then you're out. Like that was it. Like they crammed every position, like everybody into 2 days. You did your interviews, there. Obviously, if they wanted to speak with you, kind of afterwards, obviously they fly you up, they talk to you, things like that. But other than that, it was like 2 days and they were gone, dude. Like it wasn't this whole production where it's 5 days and guys get to just go hang out and enjoy the city and sit around and kick it. Like it was nothing like that at all. It was definitely 2 days of intense workout, getting yanked on, by doctors, getting grilled by coaches, doing your drills, and then they put you on a plane and they sent you home.
Man.
So that was it.
A lot different.
Yeah, that's crazy. Marcus, you were talking about being a receiver. What advice would you have for Travis Hunter? Would you tell him to pick a side, or do you think a two-way player can hold up in today's NFL?
Really, if you look at history, and I played a little bit of both. Myself. Obviously Deion. I don't know if you guys remember Dale Carter.
Oh yeah. Yep.
Yeah, Dale Carter played both. So there have been guys that have done both.
Champ Bailey.
Champ. Champ did it. But pick your main position, which is what we all did. Myself, Champ, Dale, Prime. Obviously, we're all cornerbacks, and then we got sprinkled in, at the wide receiver position. So if Travis asked me, I would say, look, dude, pick your main spot. Yes, you're a good receiver. I think you're better cornerback. That way you can, focus on, most of your energy on playing cornerback. And then you can get sprinkled in, at wide receiver, when they need you, or just kind of, as a game playing you in. That way you really do you are seeing your body. You're not playing, all these crazy reps. And I think he's understanding now that everybody in the NFL is fast. You got D linemen that run like linebackers. Like it's different. It's different than a college game. Like it's completely different. And it's a lot more physical. It's a lot more mentally draining, as well. So just pick your main spot, which I think he should just play corner and focus, on corner, 90% of the time, and then say that other 10%, to play wide receiver. And that'll create that longevity for you. You'll still get your balls, and you'll still get have an opportunity to get in and make plays on offense, but you'll get most of your plays on defense. And then now I guess the thing that a lot of people probably don't think about is there's a big difference between running straight ahead and running routes and backpedaling, having a turn, break 45 downhill, doing everything backwards. So you're working, your muscles in different ways, different angles. So now you're putting more pressure on your joints, on your muscles, on your ligaments, on on things like that, because you're doing all these different movements forwards and backwards. And that takes a toll on you after a while. It just does. So that would be my advice to him, though. Just with all those things to consider, just focus on corner at 90%. Play wide receiver the other 10-15%, however you want to divvy it up.
Marcus Coleman, special teams coordinator for UTRGV, and of course, longtime NFL corner and Texas Tech legend. Marcus, thanks for your time, man. Appreciate you very much. Take care, brother.
Thanks, Marcus.
I appreciate you too, man. Appreciate y'all.
Marcus Coleman joining us here on Big 12 Radio as we wrap a bow around our discussion on Big 12 corners and the NFL draft from Saturdays to Sundays. On the way next, we continue our series in breaking down full court review. How did each basketball team do this basketball season? Well, we had UCF on Friday who made the tournament. Now we talk about a team in West Virginia that didn't, but got oh so close and did win a championship. That's next. West Virginia's in our crosshairs talking full court review. Modelo's Big 12 basketball team recaps is next. Plus, we've got some news in the Big 12 and the portal. It's all coming up. This is Big 12 Today on Big 12 Radio.
Zeroes in, flicks the wrist, and Royer is wide open. Wrestled down inside the 20.
Ryder in the backfield on 3rd
flag, though, in the end zone.
It's clearly offside because you got a guy running on the field. They made a play the entire play with 12.
Get off the field. Sorsby hangs it and delivers. Joe Royer. Watch Joe Royer here working in the middle of 3. Just goes up, sees his quarterback in trouble. Defender falls down, but nice job going up, making the play. Taylor Davis.
Open in the flat, Sorsby the other way. Pass is caught, Joe Royer to the end zone. And a hop, skip, and a jump.
Joe Royer was on the opposite side of the line of scrimmage, and so he runs across the formation. The defense not only does it get him.
Through 6 weeks of the season, and Baker Mayfield might MVP.
Here's Joe Royer who breaks the tackle. Joe Royer, touchdown.
Royer, all he does is turn around, sit, show hands, and then he makes one guy miss and land in Cleveland, and he races to the end zone for the touchdown.
This is Big 12 Today on Big 12 Radio. We are presented by Modelo. And, of course, as the football offseason never sleeps, so too does the basketball offseason. And plenty of news in the transfer portal coming fast and furiously. We will get to our full court review, West Virginia, in a moment. But a name that we talked about last week has officially committed. Leroy Blyden, the all-freshman, MAC freshman of the year, averaging 16.5 points and 4.3 assists per game while shooting 40% from three, has committed to Kansas. So the Jayhawks land a big-time prospect with 3 years of eligibility left at the point guard position. He's from Detroit. When you think about Blyden and a guy like Alex Wilkins, who went from not having a single high major offer in high school to Kansas and Kentucky in 1 year, not too shabby for those two guys.
No, and that's the upside of the portal, is that players who wouldn't even be able to sniff that type of opportunity out of high school go undiscovered. They land at mid-majors. They have a breakout year, and it results in, number one, a huge payday, and then number two, just an opportunity that they wouldn't have to play in. Like, you think Leroy Blyden Jr., who blossomed late in the recruiting process, was like a 2 or 3 star recruit, would have ever dreamt of playing in front of 16,000 fans at historic Allen Fieldhouse? Not even close. And he's super hungry. That's what I like about him. You know, this is very different than what Bill Self has recruited in the past. He's recruiting a young player who is elite offensively, needs to get better on the defensive end, but it's a pretty dramatic shift from like a Melvin Council Jr., who was a poor shooter, not a scorer, but an excellent defender, long-armed. This guy is crafty, and he can fill it up on offense.
Yeah, Jeff Goodman on X posts a scouting report from a MAC coach. Quote, quick, sharp-shooting point guard, makes the right plays. He can score at all 3 levels, but his ability to shoot 40% from 3 and also get to the rim makes him a tough cover. He doesn't turn the ball over and makes free throws. Once Toledo gave him the ball as the more primary option, he was the best offensive player in the MAC. Weaknesses are he's thin and defended like a freshman. So to your point, way more offensive firepower right now, and we'll see. Utah's also added a big-time player, and that's point guard Noam Yaakov, who is one of the top European prospects this cycle. He was actually being recruited by Indiana, Villanova, and Washington, but chose Utah as a point guard at 6'2", averaging 18 points and 5.7 assists per game, converting 41% from 3, playing in Dutch leagues last year. Noam Yaakov, 6'2" point guard, landing in Utah.
Well, and Utah has a general manager who was with several NBA franchises and was most notably with the Kings in their turnaround when they actually had a couple of solid seasons. And so their international scouting goes really deep. Utah is a place that they don't have a lot of transfer portal commits right now, because I think they're going to hit that international market and try to build from overseas. That's a really nice get for the Utes.
Yeah. All right, let's take a look now in our full court review at West Virginia. Modelo's Big 12 basketball season reviews. And, it's interesting because West Virginia, like Michigan, is one of the few teams in the country that ended their season with a win. It's rare for that to happen. They went 21-14, 9-9 in the Big 12. They finished 7th in the Big 12. And I think, the big question heading into the season was, can Ross Hodge coach? It was the 4th coach in 4 seasons for West Virginia. And I would say with what he built and how quickly he was able to build it, to pull off 21 wins with this squad, it was pretty remarkable. So I think, can Ross Hodge coach? Hell yeah, he can. This past year was a great example of it.
Totally agree. I think of the first-year head coaches in the Big 12, he had the best initial campaign. And I think West Virginia is going to be a tournament team this year. Now, they have to kind of rebuild their roster for the 4th year in a row. They didn't return any production from Darren DeVries' team. Remember, he goes to Indiana. He takes everybody with him, including his son. So they went out and recruited a lot of guys from mid-major programs. Guys from North Texas came with him and improved their production from North Texas to playing in the Big 12, which says a lot about his coaching ability. West Virginia, they just didn't have enough pure shooters this past season. But getting Honor Huff, getting Brendan Lorient, Eaglestaff, Moore, Floyd, all guys that led the team in scoring, all guys, though, that were seniors. And so West Virginia is one of those programs that's very much waiting on this eligibility ruling to see how many of these guys might actually be able to come back, because they love ball. They're not future pros outside of maybe Huff, who could probably play overseas. Those other guys are guys that just love Ross Hodge, and that team played really hard.
Yeah.
They weren't as talented as some teams in the Big 12, but you knew that when you played West Virginia, if you didn't bring your A game, you were going to get beat. And for them to win the crown, like just to want to play, that says a lot about Ross Hodge and the culture that he's already built at West Virginia.
Well, remember, Nebraska won the crown 2 years ago and then parlayed that into a 28-win campaign and a trip to the Sweet 16 for the first time in their program's history. They beat Oklahoma 89-82 in the crown championship. Honor Huff scored 38 points, a career high with 8 from 3. He had 8 of 15 from 3 and hit 12 of 12 for the free throw line. They were down 13 in the second half, then down 6 in overtime. West Virginia went on a 13-0 run to beat Oklahoma in overtime and win that crown, forcing 14 turnovers. They made 15 threes against an Oklahoma team that shot 53% from the field. So big-time win for them in the crown. And, look, I mean, West Virginia as a program, they're not used to not making the NCAA tournament. You know, under Bob Huggins, they went to the Sweet 16 every year, 3 times in 4 seasons, 2015 to 2018, but now 3 straight years without making the NCAA tournament. They were 18th in Ken Palm defense, so to your point, they did a great job in getting the most out of the talent that they had, but they were not very good offensively. And I think one of the big reasons for that was Trayson Eaglestaff wasn't as good as expected. He was a guy that came in from North Dakota averaging 19 points a game, and he was limited to just 9.5 points on 39% shooting this past year. So put Huff in a situation in which he had to be the main scorer, and that was not a role that he was used to. So I think the fact that they got as many wins as they got, despite their best transfer portal addition this past offseason not really making a huge impact, says a lot about Ross Hodge as a coach.
Yeah, and Eaglestaff was really streaky. He'd either go for 25 or he'd go 0 for 7 from 3. The fact that with back-to-back years that West Virginia's had first-year head coaches, to play 500 basketball in this league is a miracle.
Yeah.
And so to me, with Ross Hodge and his connection to Ren Baker, the athletic director, he's going to be there for a while. Tells me that West Virginia is poised for a breakthrough. Like, they've been right there, just missing out on the NCAA tournament. 2 years ago, they're the first team out. This past year, they turned down the NIT to play in the Crown. The year before that, they had a 9-win season. They're really difficult at home because of that home court advantage that they have at the Coliseum. And then, to your point, like, they were exceptional defensively. Top 20 in the country, as you noted. They were really good on the glass, even with a lack of size. They had one of the smallest teams in the Big 12, and they still were just gritty and tough. So if they find some shooters, in Ross Hodge's system, dating back to when he was at North Texas, him and McCaslin are really close. Like, it's very much spacing oriented, and they thrive when they have perimeter shooters, and they don't turn the ball over. It's kind of a slower, methodical pace. They don't get a ton of fast break points, but I think stylistically, like, it leans more Houston-esque than anybody else in this conference in terms of pace of play. So I really like what West Virginia is going to have this upcoming season and for years to come.
Yeah, they're missing their entire starting lineup. 6 players are out of eligibility, and we'll see again if any of those guys are able to get any of that back. But they do have the highest-rated recruit in program history coming in Miles Sadler, which is a huge get for them. Plus, love the addition of the former Georgia Tech center, Mohamed Silla, who is 6'10", 240 pounds. He averaged 10 points and 7.2 rebounds, shooting 58% in 16 games. He missed time due to an ankle injury, but he's got high upside on both ends of the floor, including 1.2 blocks per game. They also added Javon Buchanan, the Boise State forward, and Butler guard Finley Bizjack in the portal.
Bizjack's a baller. 17 points per game. That was 3rd in the Big East. He's an elite shooter, 42% from the field. Also makes his free throws, 85% at the line. He can create his own shot. He can get downhill. Buchanan is more of their spot-up shooter. 13 points per game, as you noted. Honorable mention All-League at Boise State. And then what a find in the portal, the big from Georgia Tech. Only played in 16 games. Like you said, he got hurt. And so that probably hurt his portal stock. But 6'10", 240, he was a top 15 player nationally. Like, high 4-star, low 5-star, not top 15 center, like top 15 overall recruit.
Overall, yeah.
He was Damon Stoudemire's top recruit at Georgia Tech in the 2025 class. So just 2 years ago. He's got 3 years of eligibility. He could be a game changer. And then you factor in Sadler, the 5'11 point guard who is dynamic. 12 of their 15 spots have been filled, so West Virginia is ahead of schedule when it comes to building their roster for next season.
Yeah, all right, let's get further in depth on West Virginia with Keenan Cummings from WVSports.com. That's next. Along with James Westling, I'm Ari Tepkin. This is Big 12 Today, and our full court review, Modelo's Big 12 basketball team recaps, West Virginia. With James Westling, I'm Ari Tepkin. On social at Ari Sports. He's at James Westling, and this is Big 12 Today, presented by Modelo. Heard on TuneIn, watched on Big 12 Studios.
students, they don't start classes till Monday, but they are here. The student section is full, and off we go. Kansas to have the first possession. They had a miraculous come from behind win. They were down 15 with less than 5 to play to TCU and won in overtime.
Melvin Council Jr. was fantastic in that overtime.
Huge plays, and there's the first bucket for the Mountaineers by Brennan Lauria. And Kansas right now has 14 of their 17 points in the paint. That's got to make Bill Self happy.
Yes.
Three-pointer drops down by DJ Thomas to tie it. The only time you've been in this building until today.
That's
so
right.
Hope you're not haunted.
No wins and losses today.
Trey White up ahead. White flushes it down.
Let's see Kansas get something in the paint.
Peterson going that way. There you go, Fonz. Right to the rim for Darren Peterson. He was feeling it. Now Trey Eaglestaff gives it up. Huff on the drive. Teardrop and the foul. The little fella with a big heart and a big bucket to pull him back within 2. Thomas, a kid who had committed to play at North Texas for Ross Hodge. When Hodge left for Morgantown, so did he.
A little matchup zone look. Got to get that basketball to the paint.
Pretty good ball movement, and Trey White is really heating up. He's got 16. Mountaineers a chance to grab the lead. Inside, Obi Oha puts West Virginia in front. How about that step back, but Huff couldn't get the shot off.
You see the ground he covered on that step back? That was sick.
He lets it fly. Count it! A chance at 4 for number 3. 14,000 on their feet in Morgantown as West Virginia takes down Kansas.
Big 12 today on Big 12 Radio. We are presented by Modelo, and this is our full court review. Modelo's Big 12 basketball team recaps. Taking a look at West Virginia hoops. Keenan Cummings from WVSports.com, part of the On3 Sports Network. Keenan, how are you?
Doing well, guys. How you doing?
Doing very well, and there's so much to get to with you in terms of just this season for West Virginia hoops. And, I mean, when you think about 4 coaches in 4 years, a brand new team, the fact that Hodge got to 9-9 in conference play and, you know, a crown championship, I would say is fairly remarkable.
Yeah, I think overall, there's not a lot really to be displeased with what West Virginia was able to do. Like you mentioned, it was an entirely new roster. Nobody had played on West Virginia's roster last year. It was kind of put together, I don't want to say late, but obviously he didn't have the kind of the groundwork that you would typically have coming into a Power 4 program. So was able to get some guys he was familiar with, able to get some pretty good transfers. Obviously, Honor Huff had a big year. And, yeah, there's some times, you know, there's some games that West Virginia obviously would like to have back. You know, if they're able to beat Clemson and Ohio State, you're probably talking an NCAA tournament appearance, but weren't able to close out those games. But I think the thing that really stood out to me the most this year is Ross Hodge always talked about from the moment this team was put together, just how they stuck together and how they always kept fighting, how they always stuck together. And you saw that at the end of the season, you know, in the Crown Tournament. Obviously, there's some NIL money to play for, but you know, West Virginia, you know, they could have packed it up. They could have went home, and they battled back in not 1 but 2 games and won that tournament with a lot of seniors and not a lot of guys coming back. So I think it was a pretty impressive year.
Yeah, were West Virginia fans even aware that they were playing in a postseason tournament, and not just that, but had a ton of success?
Yeah, they were. Fans here are very fanatical, I guess is the best way to put it. They follow it. They're aware. I think there obviously was a little bit of initial disappointment, you know, not making the tournament. I know it's a high bar to set for year 1, but West Virginia fans got spoiled under Bob Huggins to a degree that they were going to the tournament so much. It's become the expectation here. But I think anytime you look back, you get 21 wins in year 1. That's nothing to be ashamed about.
Yeah, well said. And look, I think, you know, despite, like, there were things that didn't work out. Like we talked last segment, the Trayson Eaglestaff is a guy that averaged 19 points a game that only averaged 9 points for West Virginia. It seemed like, you know, he had some high highs and low lows. So Honor Huff then had to emerge and did in a big way. So, I mean, it's not like everything went right for this team. And yet, despite that, again, they still got the 21 wins.
Yeah, and you mentioned earlier 9-9. I think the 9-9 in conference is probably, you can argue, even more impressive.
Yeah.
Just given what they were able to do. Now, they had a few, as I mentioned, a few they'd really like to get back. You know, you don't lose to Utah at home. You don't lose on the road at Kansas State, and they were leading in both of those games. And then you throw in one of those wins I was talking about earlier, probably in the dance. But, you know, I think that they were able to grow defensively. By the end of the year, there was a really good defensive team. And you mentioned Trayson Eaglestaff. Yeah, he was very up and down when it came to his scoring, but his growth as a defender is something that Ross Hodge can point to. You know, I don't want to call him a liability, but it definitely wasn't his strong suit. And by the end of the year, he was a really good defender. And I think that's kind of that development. And you can kind of sell that going forward, not just with him, but the way that they featured some of these new guys, some of these transfer guys that, you know, for transfers they're looking at now, look what we can do for you. And, you know, you get a guy like Miles Sadler that's going to come in this coming year, and maybe you're playing at a higher pace.
So you bring up pace, which is what I wanted to ask you about next, because West Virginia was a slower-paced team last season, and I thought Ross Hodge did a tremendous job of kind of building his system around the players that he had. Ideally, what do you think he wants his system to look like?
I have asked him this question because it was a question I had when he first got hired, because obviously they played at a slower pace at North Texas as well. Mm-hmm. And I think some of that he told me is personnel-driven. You know, you don't want to run up and down when you don't have the personnel to do it. It's just a bad idea, especially if you're going to play defense the way they play defense. I do think that they want to get faster. They will get faster with Miles Sadler coming in. I think ideally, you know, they don't have to, you know, they don't need to be running up and down the floor. But if you just get to Houston's pace, I think that, and with the way that they play defense, I think that that's going to lead to success offensively and defensively. Obviously, it's going to depend on the personnel they get. But if you look at some of the guys they're bringing in, athletic guys that can run the floor, I think you're going to see West Virginia play a little bit faster, you know, heading into next season.
Let's talk about the 2027 team. So, you know, I don't know what's going on in terms of some of these guys trying to get extra eligibility, but for the most part, it's going to be Miles Sadler, who's the highest rated recruit that West Virginia's ever added in basketball, plus a big time transfer prospect in Mohamed Silla, and then Javon Buchanan from Boise and Butler guard Finley Bizjack are three names to know.
Yeah, West Virginia's roster, again, it's going to be almost a complete revamp, restart. They're losing 9 of 10, guys that really played significant minutes. And the one that is coming back right now in Amir Jenkins, he had offseason shoulder surgery already on one arm, and he actually tore labrums in both shoulders.
Wow.
So he's got to have another one. So his kind of prognosis and what's going to happen there is obviously up in the air. That's nothing to play with, obviously. So it's going to be kind of a fresh start. Obviously, you got Sadler. He's really good. If you've paid attention to high school basketball at all in the last month, you've heard his name. He's played really well in pretty much all the elite showcases, kind of shown what West Virginia thought of him, early on. He had a tie there with assistant Yusuf Ali, who actually coached him when he was around 14 years old. So there was a connection there. He likes the coaching staff, liked his visit here. So that's obviously going to be one of your centerpieces. Mo Silly, you mentioned, really, really athletic big man. West Virginia needed to get a big man, especially one like that. He's depending on what rankings you're looking at, very, very high level transfer for West Virginia. Can run, finish around the rim. Obviously, with his length, he's a good rim protector. So I think that's what they need. And then you're filling in pieces around. Finley Bizjack has scored the ball at a high clip. They played him on the ball and off the ball. At Butler, he's had different roles. The year before, he was kind of more of a catch and shoot guy. And this past year, he's kind of a crafty, kind of do everything type. So it'll be interesting to see, how he's utilized. He won't have to do everything at West Virginia with obviously Sadler in the fold. So that's exciting. And then Buchanan's just that versatile forward that you can do a lot of different things with, and you need those guys. West Virginia had one this past year in Brendan Laurent. Who knows what'll happen there with 5 years and if he'll even think about coming back. But I think that you're starting to see the makings, the foundation of what this team's going to look like. But obviously, they've still got more work to do. I think they have 8 players right now, eight, I believe, and a couple of those guys are, into the bench types. So I think that they're going to have to obviously continue to put this together. But I think the arrow is pointing up right now with the personnel they have.
Well, that's a great note about Sadler and the connection because, he's playing in Arizona or somewhere on the West Coast and ends up in Morgantown. You wonder how that happened. And when I think about West Virginia in all the all league point guards they've had, Huff was really good this year. But then I think about McBride and Javon Carter and Miles and all those really good guards. How would you describe, from what you've seen and know, Sadler's game?
Really, this almost sounds cliche, but he can do it all. I mean, he's just really impressive. Has a way to get to the basket. Really good distributor. I think that he's as impressive as a guard as I've seen. I think he's kind of underrated with where he's at right now, and I've felt that way even before, what he's done at the highest level. So I think that there's a lot of excitement and expectations with him, and it'll be interesting to see how it translates because, he obviously has a great skill set, but you never know till guys get here, till guys start playing. But I think that a lot of people are expecting him to do big things. I think people in the program are expecting him to do big things. And you're kind of seeing the way that this roster is built. It's kind of around him in a sense, which is a lot of expectations, but I think he's going to be ready for the challenge.
Who else, in terms of the portal, do you think Hodge is looking at? And who else do you think they fill up the roster with for 2027?
That is the question right now. That is. I think that they're looking at quite a few guys. I mean, I think they need to get another kind of longer guard / forward type. They're going to need to get some of those, and there's some of those guys out there. Abdi Bashir from Kansas State is a guy that, I think is at least worth tracking, would fit that role, and there's some others as well. But that's going to be the interesting. I think that over this coming week, I think they're supposed to have a few visits, and then you'll see more of that come together, in the next, I would say, any more things are expedited. I try to tell people it's kind of more of a planned jog instead of a frenzied sprint, especially right now with everything going on with eligibility and who knows what's going to happen with some of these 5-for-5 guys. So we'll see. But I do feel that they've got the foundation in place, at least most of it. One thing that kind of surprised me was Jackson Fields entering the portal because I thought he would be a piece of that. But other than that, it's gone pretty much according to plan. They landed 3 guys they really, really wanted. And obviously they have Sadler and the other freshman and 4-star Ellie Doom.
Any nuggets you can share with us from spring football?
Well, I think, again, this sounds almost cliche, but it needs to be said. West Virginia definitely looks more athletic and longer, pretty much across the board, and that was the plan. You know, they went out and revamped this roster again. A couple guys coming back, some key guys coming back, but they added 80-plus guys for 2 years in a row. Last year it was more of a scramble, trying to just bring in as many guys as they can because they really didn't have a roster. This year, it was more, okay, we're getting this guy, we're getting that guy. I think everyone wants to know about quarterback, and they've kept that kind of guarded. I think depending on who you ask, it's a different guy. But Scotty Fox and Mike Hawkins, the transfer from Oklahoma, those are the 2 that are battling it out. In the spring game, both of them had moments. They were in non-contact jerseys, but you can kind of see the athleticism. You know, Fox is more athletic than people give him credit for. He had a 16-yard run, but Hawkins has kind of a different element to him there, and we didn't get to see it, you know, but you could see it if you were watching kind of what he can do. I think wide receiver is going to be an upgrade for West Virginia. Up front is definitely an upgrade. They're not playing guys that haven't played before. They went out and got some experience transfers, so I feel pretty good as of right now. Now, obviously, there's a lot of work left to do. This team's going to have to continue to mold around what Rich Rodriguez wants, but just the way he's talking about it, he's not nearly as frustrated as he was at this point last spring, which he kind of wears his emotions on his sleeves at times. So you can kind of read into that what you will.
Yeah, well said. Keenan Cummings, WVSports.com, part of the On3 Sports Network. Always appreciate your time and insight here. Thank you so much.
Thanks for having me on, guys.
Great to visit with Keenan Cummings as we talk through the Big 12 basketball recap, full court review, plus get Keenan's thoughts on spring football as the football season comes nearer.
Yeah, this kid from
Georgia Tech?
No, the high school kid.
Miles Sadler.
Yes, who's playing in Scottsdale, Arizona. So he's Canadian. He's 18 years old. He is the real deal. So this Nike Hoop Summit that was just earlier this month, like this was a couple weeks ago. So he's playing on the Canadian team. He was the Nike Hoop Summit MVP. First Canadian to earn MVP since R.J. Barrett, who went to Duke back in 2018. They played Team USA. Team USA had all 7 of the top 7 prospects on their team. So the top 7 players in the recruiting rankings, all 5 stars, are playing for Team USA. Sadler finished with 29 points, 7 assists, shot 55% from the field, 60% from 3, led all scorers in a 102-100 overtime loss to Team USA. There were a bunch of NBA scouts there. They said like he was unguardable. They said they would put him in isolation. They were face guarding him. They were doubling him the entire second half. He still led the game in scoring.
Wow.
Like this is a one-and-done future pro prospect that's going to be suiting up for West Virginia at point guard.
Big 12 today on Big 12 Radio with James Wesley. I'm Ari Temkin. We are presented by Modelo. Some news on the women's transfer portal front, plus more on the final whistle next. This is Big 12 Today, presented by Modelo. Heard on TuneIn, watched on Big 12 Studios.
He play right there. And Celestine just rips it away from Eaglestaff. Now Jizzle James will try a 3. That one slips in.
And they need him to do things like what we just saw.
Set up the three-pointer for James, who has it again. Jizzle James, perfect from the floor to start this game. 3 for Miller. This time working against Jasper Floyd. Good cross-court pass, and Jizzle James just cannot miss. He started this game 4 for 4. He's got 10 points. Transition opportunity now for the Mountaineers. Huff, great feed inside, and another assist from Honor Huff. This time he finds Brennan Lorient.
And when you make shots, your defense automatically grows.
Huff. Oh my, Honor Huff
drew the contact on the fly. Miss here in this second half. Adjusted tempo rankings that King was talking about, and another and one opportunity for Honor Huff. Cincinnati, 1-point lead. Asper Floyd, they left a man open in the corner. It's DJ Thomas to give West Virginia the lead once again.
It could be a 2 or a 3, but you got to go quick.
Oh, Jizzle James, he lost it. Just like the end of the first matchup between these two teams. And it leads to a Lorient transition dunk. 59-54, West Virginia. As Celeste misses the 3. And the Mountaineers complete the season sweep of the Bearcats, and it's their largest comeback for a win since 2022.
This is Big 12 Today on Big 12 Radio. We are presented by Modelo. Along with James Westling, I'm Ari Temkin. Gearing up for a big week here on Big 12 Radio. Of course, if you missed Joey McGuire, who was our guest earlier on today's show, you're not going to want to miss our podcast. So make sure to check out the Big 12 Today podcast channel, wherever you get your podcasts. Just search Big 12 Radio and you'll find us there. You can also get a chance to listen to that on tomorrow's show, as we'll replay that interview for you because you're not going to want to miss it. Plus, we're continuing to break down our full court season recaps and look ahead to 2027, where some of the portal prospects are being filled for roster spots. And, of course, our NBA or NFL draft look ahead from Saturdays to Sundays as we're looking through each and every program in the Big 12. Utah and Houston on tomorrow's show, plus defensive ends, which will be a big day in Big 12 country.
Big day. Going to be a big day.
Big day. Thursday's round 1. Friday, rounds 2 and 3. Friday's my favorite day of the draft. Like, Thursday's fun. It gets all the attention because it's the first day of the draft, but Friday's that's the day. That's the moving and shaking day. And really, when you look at championship rosters, you've got to get a starter in round 1, but if you're able to get multiple starters in rounds 2 and 3, now you've hit big time in the draft.
Mm-hmm. And really that started with the Seattle Seahawks and their run back in, what was that, like 10 years, maybe even longer, 15 years ago?
But they just won the Super Bowl. I don't know if you know that.
Just recently they won it, but I'm talking old Seahawks, all right? The original.
Of course.
No-fly zone? No, that's Denver. Legion of Boom.
Legion of Boom.
Got it. Richard Sherman, that group.
Back only needed 2 guesses.
Only needed 2 guesses. But, that was the way because they got Russell Wilson in the 3rd round and had him on a rookie contract. They were able to pay guys that wouldn't have been playing in Seattle because they had drafted so well. And then the Chiefs in their run, they were doing it. The Patriots were doing it. They had Tom Brady, and then they would pay big money for a top-flight NFL free agent and only stash him for like 2 or 3 years. Randy Moss comes to mind, and then they would draft really well. What if I told you the Houston Cougars have had a player drafted in 9 of the last 10 seasons?
Wow. I'd be surprised, but I suppose I shouldn't be.
Surprised you shall be because it's happened. From 2016 until now, they did a phenomenal breakdown here, by the way, of all their draft stuff. Can every school do this? Shout out to Fletcher. This is amazing. And they're going to have guys drafted this year. They're going to have Koziol. They're probably going to have Latrell McCutcheon Sr. get drafted. So that streak's going to continue.
Yeah, well said. All right, pretty big news in women's college basketball. Audie Crooks, one of the top players of the Big 12, will remain one of the top players of the Big 12. She goes from Iowa State to Oklahoma State. Report surfacing this morning that Audie Crooks has committed to Oklahoma State. Obviously a huge addition for that program. And, with Iowa State under Bill Fennelly, that's been one of the premier programs in women's college basketball. Fennelly's been one of the best coaches. But unfortunately, in the era of NIL, it appears that they just don't have the resources at the women's basketball level to compete, which is why a lot of their big-time players have left, including Audie Crooks.
Dude, Oklahoma State is cleaning up in the portal in women's basketball.
Clearly, they've got money to spend.
Yeah, and J.C. Hoyt's going to have a really good team. And there were some players that were departing that kind of left me scratching my head, and I'm now believing that it's because they knew the type of budget that Oklahoma State had to work with in the portal. They just threw a bag at Audie Crooks, All-American center, pair her with Liv McGill, who was like a 17-point-per-game guard at Florida, averaged almost 6 assists per game, and then they've added a transfer from Rutgers, from Lindenwood, a Division II player that averaged 28 points per game. Like, they are cleaning up in the portal and building a very nice team.
Yeah, and it's just interesting to see sort of the trends in the portal and NIL in terms of where, each school and program is spending their money. And then obviously it's not apples to apples. Some sports are much more expensive than others, but obviously football is a huge priority for Oklahoma State. They brought in a ton of Eric Morris's players, from North Texas. We've seen them in baseball, spend money. Are they at that level they need to be with where they are in the Big 12 right now? Softball, too, has been one of the better programs in the country. Are they spending money on softball to be at the level that Texas Tech is and some of the others? But women's basketball, that's, obviously a huge investment for them.
Yeah, and, I'm even looking at men's basketball. Right now they've got a top 5 roster in the Big 12, according to our guys at Shooty Hoops. They add a transfer from North Carolina who wasn't, sitting on the bench. He averaged 10 points per game, shot 35% from 3. To get that caliber of player, you have to have money to spend. Kashi Nat is, Evan Miyakawa told us, the most underrated transfer and the highest-rated mid-major transfer in the country. Loves, from an efficiency standpoint. He's going to average 7 or 8 points per game, but he's one of the best defenders in the country. Has just NBA caliber hops. It's insane. He's a walking highlight. And then they've added a top 25 recruiting class, high school class, back-to-back seasons. Oklahoma State, they have figured something out. I don't know if it's all these cross-Canadian ragweed concerts they're doing each April, but they are getting some funds in Stillwater.
The boys from Oklahoma roll their joints all wrong. I don't know if you knew that.
Nice reference there
Thank
for
you.
today.
Didn't know if you're familiar with the whole catalog from Cross Canadian Ragweed.
Oh, huge fan.
Huge catalog fan.
Yeah.
Oklahoma State, J.C. Hoyt has now landed number 1, number 2, number 3, number 4, number 7, number 8 top 10 recruits in program history. So on the women's side, kind of redefining Oklahoma State women's basketball. J.C. Hoyt, they've been really good the last couple of years, and now you think about what they're doing in the portal and NIL. It's remarkable. And I think, again, like there's probably some strategic investments that programs are going to be making, but in some cases it kind of depends on availability, price, and program. Right? Like if you're Oklahoma State, this is a worthwhile investment because J.C. Hoyt has proven in 2 years how good of a coach she can be, and then you supercharge that, the portal, with, what I can only imagine is high-level spending at that level, high level in terms of women's basketball, but modest in terms of the overall, picture of the whole thing, right? I mean, it's similar to a degree with Texas Tech has done in softball, where it's like you go all in on that sport because of the opportunity cost plus coaching.
Right, and you think about Oklahoma State across the board. Wrestling,
golf,
baseball, golf. Like, they're becoming one of these schools in the Big 12 that's just rock solid consistent. And with what they're doing in the portal in football, men's and now women's basketball, and I think when it comes to women's hoops, it's a really fun style of basketball. J.C. Hoyt's very new age. It's a lot of threes. It's transition. I think they've attempted more threes than anybody in the country the last 2 years. And then also, like, Gallagher-Iba Arena is a really cool venue, and they were starting to pack it for women's games. I think they're going to be next level, men's and women's, this year, and get back to what Gallagher-Iba used to be, which is one of the most hostile environments in the entire conference. A lot of people say it's too big, and it feels too big. Like, they just stacked another level on top of what it used to be. But it still has that really loud, intimate feel on the lower level where the fans are right on top of you. There is no scores table in the Big 12 that has a shorter distance from scores table to fans. They're literally sitting right behind you. So they're that close to the court all around the hardwood, which it's really tough when it's full.
All right, we will do more on spring football throughout this week and sprinkle in some of the stories as there were plenty of spring games this past weekend, including Texas Tech. We visited with Joy McGuire earlier on the show, and it was an opportunity for Brendan Sorsby to get his feet wet in terms of the Texas Tech offense. He had a game-winning throw to Micah Hudson.
Old friend alert.
You're right, and a guy that has kind of become a forgotten player at Texas Tech that could emerge as a wide receiver this year and a sorely needed position.
Yeah. Micah Hudson's still a baller. Like, he was the number 1 rated player at the wide receiver position out of high school. 5-star NFL scouts saying this guy could play in the league right now. Clear-cut number 1. He's had a rocky road, and some of that's kind of been off-the-field stuff just in terms of buy-in. So to see him out there as wide receiver 1 in the spring game tells me he's poised for a monster year.
Yeah, here's what Brendan Sorsby told the media following the spring game on Friday about the offense.
This offense, anybody can get the ball at any time. We have so many weapons out there. I know people probably think I'm speaking the quarterback speak right now where it's all everybody out there is good, but, we got a ton of depth and a ton of guys that can step up and make plays.
Yeah, you don't say. And you look at just their wide receiver room alone. Micah Hudson is listed as a projected starter. Kenny Johnson is the transfer from Pitt, probably their number 1 wide receiver transfer, big-time production. Coy Aiken is back. And then you add in Malcolm Simmons, who was wide receiver number 2, but actually had better numbers than the Coleman kid down at Auburn last year. Dante Lee Jr., who is a 20 yards per catch guy at Liberty. The receiver room is much better this year than it was last year, and I felt like held back the offense at times. Even though Virgil and Douglas I know are pros, I don't know if it was just the way teams were scheming them, but maybe they didn't have enough depth at that position. I don't know what it was, but I think the productivity and the talent in that room is much higher this year.
Taking a look at BYU and their spring football activity, their new defensive coordinator Kelly Papinga is probably the biggest stories. And, what's interesting is they've got quotes from guys that transferred to BYU from various Power 5 programs, including Walker Lyons and Kyle Casper from Oregon, who both told the Deseret News that the quote-unquote talent they found at BYU was on the same level as the talent at the schools they left. So Walker Lyons at USC, and then Roger Salapaga and Kyle Casper of Oregon, all saying and telling the Deseret News, hey, the talent level of BYU is on the level of Oregon and USC.
Dude, that's really exciting if you're a BYU fan, which shouldn't be that surprising when you think about all the guys that BYU retains year over year and the fact that they've won 22 games back-to-back seasons. But losing Chase Roberts to the NFL, losing probably two of your top three defenders to the NFL, losing Parker Kingston for unforeseen circumstances, the fact that they have had, number one, a really good portal class, like a top 10 portal class. Even though they don't bring in 20, 30, 40 guys every year, they bring in about a dozen. Tells me that they've hit in the portal. And then number two, like the guys that are returning, LJ Martin, Bear Bachmeier, I mean, you don't have the same level of talent as an Oregon or a USC unless you have a really good quarterback. And so those comments tell me that Bear's about to have a monster year.
Yeah, well said. In terms of Utah, Morgan Scalley is going to add a 15th practice as opposed to a traditional spring game. Quote, we've got enough new in the system that I really want to take advantage of that 15th practice. Utah held their 22 for U Fan Day this past Saturday with thousands of fans to get into Bryce Eccles Stadium for a chance to interact with players and get some autographs. So kind of an interesting wrinkle this year to what Utah was doing for spring football. For Kansas State, and I know we talked about this kind of at the beginning of spring practice with K-State, but they're adding some muscle. In the first 3 months under Colin Klein, 27 players added more than 10 pounds of lean muscle mass, and 5 players broke all-time K-State positional squat records, including quarterback Jacob Knuth at 495 pounds, offensive lineman Keaton Jones at 605 pounds, and wide receiver Derek Sally Jr. at 505 pounds.
Which, we kind of heard that last year.
Yep. Was thinking the same thing. Different coach, though.
Different coach. Now, with that said, that was kind of the identity of Bill Snyder's programs when Bill Snyder was at Kansas State. And so I think Colin Klein is reintroducing a lot of the same things that K-State did in the weight room under Coach Snyder. So I definitely think it's a good thing. I'm more anxious to find out what Avery Johnson looks like week 1 or week 0 or whatever it's going to be now in college football. But K-State's not having a spring game, right?
Right.
Yeah, which that's a little bit different. I mean, K-State's always had a spring game. I think a lot of the schools that aren't having spring games, which for Oklahoma State it's a different story because they've just brought everybody up on a bus from North Texas to be part of their team this year. But everybody else that has so many new guys seem to be the schools that aren't having spring games outside of Colorado. So I can understand it. The coaches see that extra practice session more valuable than basically a glorified scrimmage. And really cool for Utah to still do something for the fans to keep them engaged and excited about the upcoming year.
Yeah, well said. Cannot wait to dive further into spring football. Of course, we're talking NFL draft as well. Tomorrow we're talking Utah and Houston draft prospects with some big names to know, especially on the Utah side, including 2 first-round picks at the offensive line position, including left tackle right tackle Spencer Fano and left tackle Caleb Lomu. So, of course, we'll do a deep dive in those players and then talk defensive ends, where another Fano could come off the board at defensive end for NFL teams. Of course, thanks to our great producers, Anthony Smith at Big 12 Studios, Taman T-Chains Turner here on the TuneIn side of things. Thanks, of course, to James Westling. All right, tomorrow our draft preview continues with Utah and Houston, plus looking at defensive ends. Our full court recap will be TCU. Plenty more to get to on this busy week with spring football, the draft, and of course the transfer portal wide open in basketball. All of that will be a part of tomorrow's show as well. Once again, thanks to James Westling. I'm Ari Tepkin. Big 12 Today, available on TuneIn as well as Big 12 Studios. We're presented by Modelo. We're back tomorrow, but for now we're out. Peace.